Bro, I studied from a private college. It was a terrible college. And we were associated with the Pune University. Bekar.
And that's why the market gap is that we need.
Founder of Masters Union. I thought, what a crazy idea. I came together that your object is to be one of the top 10 business schools. Why not? It will happen sooner than you think. I know it.
Harvard gave us a model. UPenn gave us a model. That spawned thousands of other universities across the world. But I think it's time for us to bring a new model, and that's what I'm trying to do.
At Masters Union, they're trying to train all of you guys business by getting you to do business. And that's really how you learn business.
So your goal is cultivating business acumen and not getting your students to build companies right after college.
20% of my students should not even consider placements.
What are you doing so deliberately to increase this percentage?
What I do is very interesting, okay? My question to you is, how many of these 1 crore graduates get a job that pays at least 40,000 rupees a month or almost 5 lakh rupees a year?
75,000?
No.
India requires 120 more universities,
1,200 more.
1,200 more universities to become a $30 trillion economy.
My impact is not going to come from Masters Union. My impact is going to come from the
This podcast is brought to you by Odoo. If you're a business owner, you know how hard it is to keep up with your customers, right? In today's fast-paced world, scattered notes, missed emails, and forgotten follow-ups can cost you very, very heavily. One lost lead could cost you in lakhs. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that helps you manage customer relationships like a pro. It helps you track every lead, every call, every deal, all in just one place. With Kanban View, Odoo keeps your deals organized, showing you exactly where each lead is in the entire pipeline. And eventually, it also tells you what needs to be done next. With their chatter system, you can stay updated with scheduling, emails, and team updates. So no more missed tasks or forgotten follow-ups. And with revenue forecasts and custom dashboards, Odoo turns your entire customer data into real-time insights, which helps you make the decisions that drive growth. So whether you're starting a side hustle or aiming to build the next big thing, Odoo CRM is the tool that will help you stay organized and grow. And the best part is, the first application is completely free for life. So what are you waiting for, guys? Go and click the link in the description and get started with Odoo today. Hi, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Bro, I'm so excited to talk to you, and I'll tell you why. I've seen what you've built, but not a lot of people have seen what you've built. What people don't recognize about you, and I'm sure they'll recognize this in 10 years, I can give this to everybody in writing, that one day people will recognize Masters Union as a revolution in the Indian education system. And the reason why I admire your work so much is because I keep saying this very often, I am a result of a failed education system. और मेरा ये हमेशा से सपना था कि मैं इंडिया के लिए एक बिजनेस स्कूल बनाऊं जिसमें मैं इंडिया को वो सिखा सकूं जो इंडिया ने सीखना चाहिए. And we both believe this, that business and entrepreneurship is one of the best way to empower somebody because it turns them into leaders who then create jobs, who then push the fabric of the Indian civilization further, and eventually they go on to become the greatest contributors to the Indian economy as free birds, not as confined individuals.
And I think it's an audacious vision to find a way there, right? To not really beat them, but to at least present an alternative to them from India, right? Most importantly.
That's a humble way of saying it. Master Pratham wants to beat them. Okay.
We learn so much from them. We are here because of them. I'm a product of one of those top 10 institutions, right? I was very, very lucky that I got to go to University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school. At that time, it was ranked 2 or 3. Right. And so I am a product of that system. So I can't really say I want to beat it, but I want to learn from it and I want to evolve it. Everything evolves. But I think our education system has not evolved as much as it should have. Our classrooms look essentially the same as they did 200 years ago,
Yeah. And today, the agenda that I have for the podcast is pretty clear. Like, I'm somebody who wants to build a business school, and I'm going to consider this as a masterclass from a person who's done it to try and understand what are the opportunities that exist in the market. And I remember when we were sitting and chatting at Masters Union, you told me that India requires 120 more universities,
1,200 more.
1,200 more universities to become a $30 trillion economy. So we have this vision कि हमको $30 trillion economy बनना है, but we do not have the machinery to be able to get to that 30 trillion.
Yeah, the infrastructure required to get to that.
Which also talks about a very big opportunity. And this is something that I admire a lot about you. And you are very giving in terms of saying that, you know what, bro, you should go and build another university, which is quite interesting. And that's not something that a lot of founders say. So today I want to decode all of this in such a way we try and understand what exactly are the biggest opportunities that lie in the education space, so that out of this podcast, if there is only a dozen of people who go out there, get inspired, and try to tap into that opportunity, one of them may become successful. That could be me as well. That would be a great thing. So that's the agenda for this podcast. If that's
Awesome.
clear, shall we get
Awesome.
started?
Let's get started.
Okay. Pratham, let's talk about your background first. Okay? From a family that has been into business for 2 generations, right? And you're the third
I'm
generation
the third
entrepreneur.
generation. Yeah, the risky one.
थर्ड जनरेशन में हमेशा रिस्क बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, क्योंकि लोगों को लगता है कि थर्ड जनरेशन एंटरप्रेन्योर है तो बन ही जाना चाहिए. बट आई हैव सीन अ लॉट ऑफ लार्ज बिजनेसेस, आई कैन नेम देम राइट नाउ, व्हिच आर इन द न्यूज़, who are failing. I can't take names, but people understand what I'm talking about. So it's not very easy to be a third generation entrepreneur and to carry the weight of your parents' responsibilities.
It's easier than being a first generation entrepreneur. I would say that. But it has its own set of challenges.
मैं आपको बताता हूँ मेरे पर्सपेक्टिव से, ठीक है? तो कई लोगों को लगता है कि थर्ड जनरेशन एंटरप्रेन्योर बनना काफ़ी आसान है, ठीक है? बट आई विल टेल यू व्हाई आई थिंक इट्स मोर डिफिकल्ट. ओके, यू हैव मनी, दैट्स फाइन, बट the other thing that I have seen a lot of people face. In fact, I was at the gym about a week ago and I saw a guy who was a second generation entrepreneur and he was struggling, bro. When I asked him, bro, why the hell are you struggling? Like, you've got all the money in the world. He told me one thing, and that is कि सर आपके पेरेंट्स जॉब करते थे क्या? मैंने बोला हाँ. तो उनका सबसे बड़ा एक्सपेक्टेशन क्या था? मैंने बोला कि क्लासरूम में फर्स्ट आना है. सो मैंने पूछा कि तो तेरे पेरेंट्स का एक्सपेक्टेशन क्या है? उसने बोला कि मेरे पेरेंट्स का एक्सपेक्टेशन ये है कि मैं 100 करोड़ के धंधे को 300 करोड़ तक लेके जाऊँ, और जब तक मैं वो 300 करोड़ का मार्क हिट नहीं कर देता ना, तो
तब
मेरे
तक तो
पे
मैं
ना,
फेलियर हूँ.
तब तक मैं फेलियर हूँ. मैं 100 से 200 लेके चला गया तो मैं सक्सेस नहीं हूँ. तो अगर आपने छोटा सा धंधा बना लिया, आपने 10 करोड़ जनरेट कर लिया, तो बहुत बड़ी बात है, लेकिन ये भी एक बहुत बड़ी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है और बहुत बड़ा एक्सपेक्टेशन है जो मुझे फुलफिल करना है, ठीक है? सो फर्स्ट आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट योर फैमिली. Tell me, where did your grandfather start? I know it's a fascinating story, so go as deep as possible.
All right, sounds good. My grandfather actually moved from Multan to India, to a place called Jalandhar in Punjab,
Multan was in Pakistan?
in Pakistan, right? So during partition or just before partition, he moved to India. He essentially attached himself with the local battalion, the local army unit that was stationed in Jalandhar cantonment at the time. And he essentially became, for lack of a better word, a chai wala for that battalion. So every battalion used to have people who would serve them food, serve them tea, serve them biscuits. He became that person, right? And that's where his journey started. It was essentially a freelance gig, if you know what I mean, right? He wasn't employed, but he was just helping the army. And that freelance gig sort of grew a little bit larger. He was able to set up a small retail store for the army, for that unit, again, serving a little bit more now than just biscuits and tea. Eventually, he realized that the real margin is in the sweets,
Okay, why?
in mithai. Because the thing is, when you're selling a Parle G, you're buying it at a certain price and you're selling it at cost plus, right? You're making a 10%, 5% margin. But when you're selling sweets, you're actually making them at home yourself. So your gross margin on that becomes much higher, right? So he realized that the highest margin in all of the products he was selling were sweets, right? This is
Walk me
laddu.
through this margin so that people understand the value addition power.
Sure. So, I mean, he would literally just buy milk, sugar, ghee, all of the raw materials that go into mithai, make that mithai at home with his wife and kids, and the next morning go to the store and sell it, right? The margin on that will always be more than if he ever were to purchase, let's say, a Parle G packet and just sell it tomorrow at a slightly higher price. Hence, the gross margin, the business economics were much better, right? With him
From
selling
5%
sweets.
to, I would say, close to 30 to 40%.
No, it could even be 70, 80%.
Oh, wow.
Right? Depending on the kind of product that it is that you're selling. And also depending on the cost of the raw material, which keeps changing, right? So he basically then decided, or he graduated to building his own sweet shop, right? He's like, let me forget about Parle G and let me forget about Coke, Campa, whatever products were coming at that time. And let me just focus on my own products that I make at home with my recipes, with my wife, with my kids, right? And in one of those workshops is where my dad was actually born, right? With the entire family making sweets, rolling laddus, flattening the burfis. And I have some pictures from that time. I'll send them to you. But that's how he built a small mithai ki dukan called Lovely Sweets. The reason he called it Lovely is also very interesting actually. He called it Lovely because that was perhaps the only English word or an English adjective that he knew,
Okay.
right? The rest of the sweet shops at that time, if you go back in that time, were all Ghasita Ram or Haldiram or one of those more traditional sounding Indian names. He wanted to be ahead of his time,
Aspirational.
aspirational, and so he named it Lovely, and that sweet shop became a hot favorite of the people living in the 5 mile radius. Right, that area was called Jalandhar Cantonment. By the way, I still live there in that same house. That shop that my grandfather started still exists, and we still go there almost every day to go for samosas in the morning and rasmalai in the evening. Next time you come to Jalandhar, I'm going to take you there.
100%.
And one shop led to another shop, one brand led to another brand, and eventually his business grew. Right, he was able to start a much larger store, which again runs to this day. It's almost a 1 lakh square foot store. Right, it's a 1 lakh square foot Candyland. Right, it's beautiful. He built it with his own 2 hands. My father and his 2 elder brothers, they all worked there as they were growing up. And that's where I think entrepreneurship was sort of instilled in our family, right? I remember even as I was growing up and my dad used to be in that sweet shop, I used to sit on the counter counting money, right? Giving change to people. And I started learning, I think, business at that age, right? At least starting to understand the concept of profit and munafa and all of that. So that's the story of my grandfather. He passed away just around the time when I was about to go to high school. And so I didn't get a lot of time to speak to him deeply about his business and about his life. But all the stories that I'm told by my parents, he was an awesome man. Honestly, like as a refugee, to start from scratch, right from selling chai to building what I would call like at least a mithai conglomerate, at least in that region, a local conglomerate if I can. And that gave wings to my dad, to the rest of my family, to me. And that's why I'm sitting here with you today.
It's very easy for you to say that, that's how he built it. Now, I want to go slightly deeper because I know that there are more stories to that man, right? Because there are so many sweet shops out there. Pratham, not all of those sweet shops become as big as Lovely Sweets. So, can you please take me a little deeper and talk to me about 3 or 4 attributes of your grandfather that turned him into who he was? Because going from selling chai, biscuit, then to sweets, and then turning that into a mithai conglomerate, conglomerate.
That was tough for me too.
कितनी बड़ी बात है भाई. So, and this is something that gets, and I'll tell you why am I asking this question. Because right now, I know for a fact that not a lot of parents can teach people how to do business because they don't come from a business background. But the one thing that they can inculcate are the values that get passed on from one generation to the other that make the next generation more successful. So, and your father is incredibly successful. So, talk to me about what are those 4 or 5 values that your grandfather has passed down the generation, which makes you guys such incredible entrepreneurs.
I think the first thing is strategy, right? And this is a story my dad tells me about one of the early strategies that my granddad deployed to bring in more customers into the store. So what he would do is he would sell samosas in the morning at a huge loss. At a loss. If the samosa costed him, let's say 1 rupee, he would sell it for 50 paisa. What that would do is that would bring the customers inside the store. And mithai ek aisi cheez hai, if people get inside the store and they look at the mithai and they smell the aroma, automatically man karata hai, right? And because of that, people would come in to buy the samosa, but they would buy maybe 3-4 other products, which probably were at a 50, 60, 70% gross margin.
Wow.
So on the cart level, he made a profit.
And
loss
leader strategy.
Correct. There you go. Right. So he deployed that without having an MBA very early on. And that really became the reason that first store became successful. It always would have a line outside, which is so interesting. I'll give you another strategy that he deployed. If you remember, even today, when you go out into the market and you look at a sweet shop, it will always have no doors, right? The sweets will literally be kept on the street, right? And all the dust, etc., is all going onto those laddus. We have all seen that, and that exists till today. At that time in the 60s, when he was building this store, he decided to build it as a closed store, right? With proper doors, right? With proper, at that time, perhaps fans inside to make sure that the product remains clean and away from the dust. Now, it's a very small thing. But even till today, mithai walas make that mistake of keeping their mithai out in the open on the street.
Yeah.
So strategy is something, thinking beyond his own time is something that was very interesting about him. I think one very core value that he instilled in my dad's passed down to me is frugality. Always do more with less, right? So if you have to, let's say, create a counter for your sweet shop, right? Rather than buying it from the market, go to the carpenter yourself and actually construct it in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. So just pay for the basic wood, etc. Make it right there and buy it, rather than paying some retailer who's taking a commission and then the distributor is taking a commission. All of that. I think frugality is something that has been at the core and been a very important reason for our success. I think the third thing is taking your team along. Right. So the people who my granddad worked with in the 60s, you wouldn't believe they still work with us today. Right?
Wow.
He has taken care of them beyond work, right? He's involved in their families. They are involved in our families. We go to their children's weddings and birthdays and they come to our weddings and birthdays. So taking the team along really creates this almost family-like attitude in the team, right? So everyone is ready to give their 100%. I remember when my granddad passed away, right? There were less family members. There were more people that he used to work with. His employees had come and they were at the front and center. They were the ones carrying the asthis. They were the ones leading the charge, right? And I think that really changed the culture of the organization. At the end of the day, especially for an education institution or even a mithai ki dukaan, which is a service business, people is what matters.
True. So you're saying strategy, frugality, and team.
And team, taking the team together, like really making them part of the business, making them feel like part of the business. And no amount of ESOPs can do that, right? It's the smaller things you do for your team and for their family, most importantly, that matters.
Talk to me about these smaller things, Pratham, because I know for a fact that if somebody is treated like family, because in business there is a slight conflict of interest. You can either build a family or you can build a sports team, or you can build a sports team and then treat them like family. But if you do the opposite, then it's going to be a problem. If you treat people like family and then you remove and add people on the basis of merit, it becomes a problem. But if you only have people on the basis of merit and they're doing insanely well, and then you build that family connection, it makes a huge difference, right? Talk to me about how do you do the small things to make sure that your team stays together, and how do you do the hard things when things go south?
No, I think merit is important, right? But I think merit can also be created. So like, for example, I'll give you the story of my dad and one of his team members. He was not performing very well, right? He was a CXO, but not performing very well. Now, as per the going corporate theory, he should be given feedback once or twice. If he doesn't respond, then he should be asked to leave. Essentially, that's what most corporates would do. I think the culture in our system is that give them one chance, sit with them, give them another chance, train them, still not learning, send them for an executive MBA program, invest in them, right? And really speak to them, not at the corporate level, but at an emotional level. Say, bhai, I want to work with you. You have been a very important part of this journey, but you're not growing as fast as the organization is, right? So you need to change these 5 things about yourself. And if you do it, then I'll take you along. Otherwise, I'll have to leave you behind, right? If you have a conversation like this, tu mera bhai hai, मैं तेरे को नहीं छोड़ना चाहता, तू चलना मेरे साथ यार, तो ये 2 चीजें कर ले, हम चलते हैं आगे इकट्ठे. I think if you have a conversation at that level, which maybe many MBAs also do not teach, right, or recommend, I think something very beautiful can be created, right? And it's a very interesting assimilation, if I can use that word, of a sports team, a family, and a meritocratic corporate system. It can all come together. Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't it be all 3 together? At the end of the day, if someone is connected to you emotionally, that will add more value to your organization than someone who's not connected to you emotionally, but is very good at his job or her job. Right? Longevity is also super important. Like, for example, I have some team members who have been with me for 2, 3, 4 years. Now, if I don't treat them like family, and if I don't build that sports team also, after 3, 4 years, if someone offers them a better salary, they will go, right? But them staying with me compounds what they can do for me over a period of time, right? So the value of compounding is a lot more than, at times, the value of someone's merit in that moment. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Pratham, now I want you to give out a message to these people who are being treated like family within the organization. Because I've spoken to a few people again at the gym only. Somehow I happen to have these conversations at the gym where people say, you know what? And this is something that is largely coming because of the IT culture. What happens is that आपने किसी को 6 लाख का पैकेज दे दिया, उसको 1 साल मेहनत करके अपने आप को प्रूव करके आगे बढ़ के 7-8 और बाद में कब वो 50 हो जाएगा समझ में भी नहीं आएगा क्योंकि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज ग्रोइंग वेरी वेरी
You're
फास्ट,
riding the wave.
right? But the thing with compounding is that for the first 3 years it doesn't show up. It's only after the 4th year or the 5th year
After 10 years, in fact.
you start to see it, and then after 10 years the compounding is evident enough for you to witness it, feel it, and then showcase it to other people in your society as well. But what I find very strange about this generation particularly is that we are a hop, skip and jump generation. We want to ride a boat, and considering there are so many startups out there, a lot of these startups will tomorrow go on to become legendary companies, and they're going to grow very very fast as compared to the companies that their fathers worked at. How would you ask a young executive to look at that company and assess this compounding and check if this organization is going to compound or not? If yes, I will stay with persistence. If not, then I can hop, skip, and jump.
Just look at the seniors who are working in their organization, people you're reporting into, their job, their bosses, the CEO himself, and see how long they have been working with that organization. If there's a culture of long-lasting relationships with that organization where people stay for a long period of time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, then you can feel comfortable with the fact that this organization invests in people and doesn't use people transactionally, right? So just go to LinkedIn, right, of that organization, see what the average tenure of people is. If it's 1-2 years and there is huge turnover, then that organization still has some distance to cover in terms of building their culture. But if people have been there for 10, 15, 20 years, then I think you can take comfort in that. However, if the organization is only 5 years old, if the organization is only 2 years old, it's a startup, it doesn't have any history, then I think you have to really look into the eyes of the promoter, the founder, the CEO, the leadership team, and try to really read their eyes to see whether this person will invest in me or not, right? Whether this person only needs me for what I can provide him today, or whether this person looks at me as an asset that he can keep investing in and growing, and eventually that person only will reap the benefits of the compounding, right? And there has to be some amount of gut feeling that you'll have to go with, right? There is no science to it. People can fake these things also. But I think if you can just look into the eyes and even ask this question in the interview that, hey, Ganesh, like, will you invest in me? What will you do to make sure that I grow with you? Ask these kind of questions in the interview and see whether the founder is stumped or whether he has a plan for you. You'll have your answer.
Now talk to me about it from the founder's perspective. Because as a founder, when I look at people, there are some people that I know for sure that these are the people who are going to stick with me for the next 5 years. And these are the people with whom I can build very large businesses, if not very large, highly impactful businesses. But then there are some people who are underdogs, who don't seem like they're going to do something really, really extraordinary. And over the years, I realized that, these are insane people who can go on to do something extraordinary. But as a founder, how quickly can I identify this? And I'll also tell you why am I asking you this question. That is because your grandfather has done it, your father has done it, and I've seen you do it with your team. So how do you pick your battles? Because there will always be someone in the organization, and this is something that we don't want it to be, but there will always be some people in the organization, 50% of the organization that I would consider, who are here to hop, skip and jump only. But it's only that 10% who are people who could be consistent compounders. So how do you identify these consistent compounders in your team?
I have a slightly different answer to this question. My Hindi teacher in my school used to say this, कि बच्चे तो कच्ची मिट्टी होते हैं, ठीक है, आपके ऊपर है कि आप मिट्टी के साथ क्या कर सकते हो. And this is what I believe about teams as well. I think if someone's joined your company, they have not joined that company to leave that company, right? They've joined it maybe to hop, skip and jump, but if they are able to build a good career there, then they will not hop, skip and jump, right? So people are coming in with good intention. They're joining you with good intention, right? They have the potential also because you saw something in them. Now it's up to the founder that what you do with that kachi mitti. If someone is leaving in 1, 2, 3 years and not staying long, then founder has to look into the company's culture and look within himself to see, "Arey, kyun ho raha hai?" Right? And whether he's doing enough to invest in people or not, whether his temper is maybe pushing people away, whether the policies are not good enough, whether the company is just not growing, right? Generally, I don't think that you can find a fault with a team member. I think the fault will always lie in the person who has the control, which is the founder, which is the leader, right? So as founders and as leaders, we have to make sure that we are doing enough for the team, we are investing in them, we are giving the right culture, that they stay for long. And if you make that culture, people will stay 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, look at Tatas, look at Birlas, right? Like 30, 40 year people have been working, right? And that's only when compounding kicks in after 10 years. So founders also, by the way, it happened with me also. Someone is not performing for 6 months. Gussa aata hai. Yeah, I've been paying this guy, he's not performing, he's not growing. You get frustrated, you start screaming at him, you start shouting at them. I have done this, I still do this. But that's a recipe for disaster. I think you have to sit back, understand where that person is coming from, why is he or she not able to perform, and then find that fix with them, counsel them, and then grow with them. You will not be able to solve 10 on 10 times, but at least I think your success rate will increase, people will stay longer, compounding will kick in, your business will experience a lot of growth because of that compounding, right? So even if you have to have patience for 6-8 months and let somebody grow through those 6-8 months, have that patience. Don't be in a hurry to just throw somebody out because 2 quarters they were not able to perform.
Got it. But do you think this also applies to large companies like TCS, where the job is boring, there is no compounding, and there is no opportunity for everybody to compound with the company because there is no compounding growth as well?
I think a lot of times people stay in a company not because they find the work very interesting, but sometimes they stay there because they find the people very interesting, or the boss very inspiring, or the mission very inspiring, right? So sometimes it's not about what you're doing 9 to 5. You are only in a job from 9 to 5, right? Let's call a corporate job 9 to 5. There is still 16 more hours in the day. And they're also dictating your decisions, right? So let's say the job is very boring. You're sitting in front of a computer doing the same thing again and again and again and again. But let's say it pays you really well. There's a reason for you to stay, right? The job is really bad, but the founder and the mission of the founder is so inspiring that you're ready to go through that grind. You'll stay for that reason, right? So there are a lot of reasons beyond just the quality of work that people stay.
TCS के लिए apply कर सकते हैं?
I think so, right? Like, I think, TCS, Infosys, HCL, there's very high turnover there, right? I understand that. That's also the nature of the job. However, if you were to talk to the founder, the CEO of TCS, they will tell you, boss, we don't like this turnover. Give us ideas on how we can improve the working conditions, how we can improve the incentives, how we can improve the culture of the organization that this reduces. Even they would love for that to be the case. I think in TCS, for example, I've been to their campuses. They have the most beautiful campuses. I went to Cognizant's office in Chennai. I don't know if you've been there, right? It's like, beyond the office, it's amazing. They have like amazing dining rooms and sporting infrastructure and like trees and gardens and all of that. And I would love to just spend time there for that reason. You also have to understand one more thing, right? What is my best alternative? What is my batna there at the end of the day, right? If I, as a team member, feel that, okay, TCS is giving me this ladder, it's giving me this culture, and I'm enjoying this, they're taking care of my family, they're giving me insurance. When my mother was not well, my boss actually came in and helped me through it, gave me a shoulder to cry on, all of that. I think people will stay.
So you're saying the key is leadership?
It's leadership, culture. I think all of those things sometimes matter even more than the quality of work, right? Like, people at TCS and people at Google, like, their work is not all that different. They're both sitting in front of a computer. They're both coding away on problems, right? But it's the culture that is different, right? It is the way the organization is investing in you that is different. And that is the reason people are staying longer at Google and perhaps not so long at TCS.
Most people think Google is all fancy work, while it is not.
You'll have to be there. Only what, 2 or 3 lakh people would have worked in Google. So they have the right to say that. I haven't. I don't know if you have ever.
I have friends who work at Google and they tell me that, yeah, it's just like a normal job. Like, you see a lot of fancy stuff on YouTube, but that's reserved only for a certain category of people. Otherwise, in fact, they also have to do boring work. We also have to do boring work. But it's that 10-20% that gets very, very exciting. Wonderful. Pratham, I've understood a few things. I would just like to summarize this section quickly. That is, your grandfather had a very humble beginning where he went from Multan to Punjab, and he became a chai wala. And from chai wala, he also went on to sell biscuits. And when he sold both of them, he realized that I'm just a trader over here, but I could make a lot more money if I could use value addition to sell sweets. That is because the cost difference between getting raw material for sweets and selling them at the cost price, sorry, getting the raw material for sweets and then selling them in the market results into much higher gross margins as compared to just selling chai and Parle G. And the margins, as you mentioned, go from anywhere between from 5 to 10% while selling chai and biscuits, all the way up to 70-80% in some cases for sweets. And then you spoke about the name Lovely Sweets, the lovely word, which today sounds pretty strange, but back then it was used because back then all the other businesses had names like Ghasita Ram
Yeah.
and Haldiram. And
Great names, by the way.
he decided to keep Lovely because he saw that Lovely was the only English word that he knew. And he also felt like because it's an English word, people would find it aspirational. And then you spoke about the loss leader strategy that he deployed to sell samosas at a loss, eventually to make money with sweets. And then when we spoke about your grandfather's greatest attributes, which turned him into such a wonderful and successful entrepreneur, you mentioned 3 attributes: strategy, frugality, and team. When it comes to strategy, like loss leader strategy, he would think ahead of the curve to understand how can I do better to build better systems, better strategies to grow my business. Eventually, he became successful. And this is something, by the way, not a lot of people think. I see a lot of these sweet shops, they function exactly the way other sweet shops function. They function exactly the way other sweet shops function. They have a standard SOP and they're happy wherever they are. Nothing wrong with that, but that also says that if a Lovely Sweets could go from a refugee to becoming a very successful entrepreneur, so can every other sweet shop, especially in Mumbai. Then you spoke about frugality. An example of that would be instead of going to the market and getting the furniture, he would just go to the carpenter, sit down with them, make the furniture himself, and then get it, because of which he can save cost, eventually resulting into same output but at less cost. And then you spoke about team, where you mentioned that if somebody is not performing well, first of all, build a sports team and treat them like a family. And if they're not performing well, talk to them, train them, educate them, talk to them emotionally to understand what exactly is the problem. Because
Talk to them as a human being.
talk to them
And
as
not
a
as
human
a
being,
resource. You know?
not as a resource. So that people understand that you really want to invest in them. And after you've given them all the chances in the world, then you can let them go if they don't perform beyond that, because that's how businesses can evolve. And then you spoke about the 3 attributes that can turn a work environment into a healthy work environment, even if the job is boring, which is great leadership, great culture, and a mission statement that can inspire other people.
People, absolutely.
Does that sum up our first segment?
That's amazing. Thank you.
Great. Let's move on to the second segment. And here's where I want to talk to you about your audacious vision of Masters Union. Pratham, I must tell you that dreaming big is a very, very big deal. And I'm saying this because every now and then I get asked, what do I want to do 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? And I often have dreams that are quite calculative. And they're not so big that they scare me. But then when I saw you, and in fact Shashank told me this, that भाई क्या बंदा है ये बोल रहा है कि ये हार्वर्ड को बीट करेगा, ये बोल रहा है कि मैं मास्टर्स यूनियन को दुनिया का, इंडिया का नहीं दुनिया का टॉप 10 बिजनेस स्कूल बनाएगा, which is a very big deal, man. So I first want to understand what exactly is this insane driving force within you, the purpose as to why are you doing what are you doing.
You know, currently, there are 2 reasons, right? One is the fact that India is home to 1.5 billion people, right, from the world. However, we have absolutely no universities in the top 10, top 50, and by some measure, even in the top 100, right, ranks across the world. The top 10 ranks are still belonging to your Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, Yale, Stern, Sloan, right? Those same top 10, top 20, top 30 have been ruling the education world for the longest time. India has not made its presence felt. And I really feel that I owe it to India, right? And India deserves a top 10 position, a top 20 position in the education rankings. Why can't we be right next to Harvard, Wharton, Stanford? That's really the main driving force that I have, at least, to build Masters Union, right? And you know, India deserves to be in the top 10 because most of the professors in the US, not most, many, are actually Indians themselves, right? They are products of India. So why not an Indian university also in the top 10? I'll tell you why this is important. Because we don't have universities in top 10, top 20, a lot of our brightest, right, who graduate from IITs, etc., they actually end up going abroad, right? And we lose them forever, right? Because when they go for their MBA abroad or MS abroad to an MIT or a Stanford, these are India's best, they eventually end up finding jobs there, get green cards there, and continue to live there. Of course, they send money back, and that's great for India. But what would have been the case had they just stayed in India? Had India had its own top 10 ranked institution, that they could have actually honed their skills there as well, right? So I really feel that from the perspective of keeping our talent in India, we need to have a top 10, top 20 institution from India. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. But tell me something, what exactly is preventing the existing universities from becoming the best? They have the infrastructure, they have all the money in the world, and yet they're not becoming the best. Why?
So in India, if you see, most of our top universities that have all the money are all public, right? They're run by the government, they're run by the bureaucracy, they're run by the system, right? And not by a private individual or private individuals or by a private board. As soon as you have a university that's run by a private board, you see something like BITS Pilani coming up and really growing. You see like something like Manipal coming up and really growing, right? So if you have more universities that are run privately outside of the government system, they have their own funding, they have their own policies, they have their own board of governors, and they don't have to wait for approvals from the bureaucracy, right? So in IIT today, if you want to build a lab, right, you first have to make a proposal that will go to the department. The department will send it to the central team. The central team will send it to the board. The board will send it to the central IT council. The central IT council will send it to the education ministry. The education ministry will send it to the cabinet. The cabinet will then approve it. Then if it's a larger one, then you have to wait for the budget to come in. And then the budget will get passed. You know how much time it may take just to get the budget passed for a lab? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, a long period of time. But when you have a private body, right? And I'm not saying for profit. I'm saying a private body, a private trust running an institution, something like a BITS Pilani or a Manipal, dare I say Masters Union. I think things will become a lot easier for these innovations to come in. If you look at the US, the top 10, let's count. Harvard, private. MIT, private. Stanford, private. University of Pennsylvania, private. Dartmouth, private, right? They're all privately run. There's a reason for that. In fact, the highest ranked government-run university in the US is probably ranked 21st, which is University of California, Berkeley. Right? So the top 20 are all private. So in India, we need more private universities to come in, have the right intent, right? Be run completely not for profit. And then you'll start seeing some Indian universities starting to get into the top 10, top 20, right? So the biggest reason is most of our universities are run by the government. And just by nature of the government, it takes time for budgets to get passed, for innovations to be delivered.
Bro, I studied from a private college. Okay? It was a terrible college. Teachers were incompetent. They couldn't teach properly. Textbooks were outdated. And we were, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, associated with the Pune University.
Yeah, you're
ठीक है.
affiliated college of
Affiliated
Pune University.
बेकार. मैं ये भी नहीं बोलूँगा substandard. बेकार. Why? Because they had to follow certain norms of the university. In fact, I also spoke to a school in Delhi and they also said that हमको ना कुछ KPIs match करने पड़ते हैं. 75% attendance. अगर ये कॉलेज इंडिपेंडेंटली काम करता तो 75% अटेंडेंस नहीं लगता. यूनिवर्सिटी ने सारे कॉलेजेस को बोल दिया है 75% अटेंडेंस चाहिए. उसको एग्जीक्यूट करने के लिए बच्चों को जबरदस्ती क्लासरूम में बिठाओ. टीचर्स जो होते हैं उनके सैलरीज इतने हाई नहीं होते क्योंकि अगेन यूनिवर्सिटी से मैंडेट आता है. आई डोंट नो कौन सी यूनिवर्सिटी से आता है, पुणे यूनिवर्सिटी में है कि नहीं, आई विल हैव टू कंफर्म. बट यू नीड अ PhD. PhD in India is useless. Most people know that. Only a handful of PhDs are somebody who actually end up doing something really crazy.
PhD is just a stamp in India.
PhD is just a bloody stamp. And there is so much politics that your guide may steal your idea
Yeah, we have all heard those stories.
and publish it,
Yeah.
and your hard work goes to the drain. Sometimes you could be a brilliant student of PhD and your guide may not approve it simply because that person does not like you. In this kind of a system, if we are producing PhDs and then we are putting these PhDs as professors in these private colleges who are then affiliated to the university, it becomes a messed up system. So my question is, now this is still fine. Now I know the reason behind why private universities, why private colleges working under universities do not function properly, that's because of the university norms.
Because the university norms, the syllabus is decided by the university. The structure, the system, the policies are all decided by the university. The college is just a physical location where those services are delivered.
Correct.
The college promoters have absolutely no autonomy.
Yeah. And then we come to private colleges who are not affiliated to a university. These are इनको क्या बोलते हैं? Deemed university.
These are called state private universities or deemed universities,
Deemed universities.
which are very few. There are only 400 in India,
Yeah.
400 or 500
Even
in India.
these 400 universities do not produce the best talent in the world. But why is that? Is that because they optimize for profit? Because profit is still fine. Like I was just looking at the EBITDAs, it's 30 to 50%. They should be able to produce great talent, right? Why don't they produce great talent?
So the thing is that it starts with a few things. Number one, availability of professors. You know how many Indians complete their PhD every year?
No idea, bro.
Just throw a guess.
10,000?
It's a little bit more. It's around 25,000, right? Of them who are actually doing it with proper research, with proper intent, probably 20% of that, 4,000, right? You know how many students are there in Indian colleges enrolled at any one point in time?
I would speak for engineering somewhere around 10 to 13 lakhs.
That's every year. So that times 4 would be 45 lakhs. But engineering is only 10% of the Indian students, right? So the total number of students enrolled in all colleges in India and all universities in India is approximately 4 crores,
4 crores, 40 million.
40 million. It's 44 million, I think, almost now. The data hasn't come in for this year. Now, 20,000 or 30,000 new PhDs coming into the market for 4 crore people. The total number of PhDs in India, let's say you count that 20,000 people have graduated for the last 40 years. That's what, 8 lakh? That's 8 lakh PhDs. That means 8 lakh PhDs are teaching
4 crore
4
students.
crore students. What's the ratio there? The ratio is almost 1:50. Is
A
it?
lot more.
Right?
Doesn't make any
1:50.
sense. Yeah, 1:50.
1:50. So when the student to teacher ratio is only 1:50, right? What can you expect from the
That to
education system?
every teacher to every student.
That to every teacher, to every student, and some of these teachers will not be good.
Yeah, competent or incompetent doesn't matter.
And we are assuming that all the teachers are still teaching. Right? There are lots of assumptions there. And we are assuming that they're teaching every term, every semester. That's also probably not true. Right? They're probably teaching just once in a year. So because of that, I think we don't have at the top enough teachers only to teach the kind of scale of students that we have in India. That's problem number one. Right? Even if I, as a college promoter, have the right intent, I want to teach, when I go into the market to get faculty, it is incredibly hard. That's number one. Number two, when I do get the faculty is also product of a somewhat flawed system, right? And they're going to teach in the same way that they were taught, right? And the current UGC, AICT, NAC, NIRF, these are all bodies that govern universities today. There are almost, if you can count, almost 18 different bodies that have created policies that dictate how a university will function.
Why the hell do we have these boards?
I mean, over a period of time, India's had 75 years of independence. And over this period of time, every government with the right intent has come in with some new policies, right? And have it to get those policies enforced, they've created new agencies and new bodies, right?
Bro, I'll tell you what, these are all revenue streams. I'll tell you why. I've seen this practically, okay? And Teju will confirm this. हमारे कॉलेज में NAC का accreditation होता है. ठीक है, मुझे सिर्फ NAC पता है. आपको पता है क्यों? क्योंकि हमारे कॉलेज में बच्चों को बोला जाता था कि मिशन स्टेटमेंट रटो. ठीक है? मिशन एंड विजन ऑफ कॉलेज रटो. तो भी हम सोचते थे कि साला ये मिशन और विजन में क्या फर्क है भाई? ठीक है? And I was the student who was a rebel, right? So they would say, you know what, you can take a leave, sit at home, get out of the college, but just don't stay here when the NAC team comes in. ठीक है? और जब NAC team आता है, ये 2-4 टॉपर्स को खड़ा कर देते हैं जिन्होंने सारे आंसर्स रट के रखे. भाई कॉलेज साफ हो रहा है. इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी का जो आया था हमारे कॉलेज में था नहीं. NAC के आने के बाद नए बोर्ड्स लग गए. ठीक है? सफाई जोर से हो रही है. टॉयलेट्स एकदम क्लीन है. तो ये तो ऐसा हो गया ना कि भाई कोई पॉलिटिशियन आ रहा है.
So I think, there is this understanding in the Indian population, and it may be right also, that colleges make a lot of money, right? And these promoters are only enriching themselves. And I'll tell you from the other side of the table that all colleges in India, all universities in India have to be not for profit, and they're audited almost as much as a public company is. Right? There is so much auditing that happens from all of these bodies that it's very hard for someone to steal money to steal students' money, right? I think some movies or some instances, or obviously students maybe have their reasons to believe that, I'm sure.
भाई ये डोनेशन कैसे लेते हैं फिर?
Yeah, that used to happen, right? The concept of donation today is very small and in very few colleges, and that also is going very, very fast, right? So, for example, earlier, if you needed an MBBS seat, you can easily donate your way into getting a seat, right? And there was so much corruption. But since this NEET exam has come in, all of that has really reduced quite a bit. It's not fully gone, right? Maybe 5, 10, 15% is still there, but it's going very, very fast. And there's a very interesting story, even that at Harvard and Wharton and at all of these large universities in the US, some of this ghapla has happened. Yeah. There is a Netflix documentary on this, by the way, where some rich parents were able to get their kids into Harvard and Stanford through the sports teams route, right? So देखो घपला हर जगह है, India में भी है, but I think it's blown out of proportion a little bit. इतना बुरा हाल नहीं है. All universities, colleges are audited very, very strictly, and they're all technically not for profits.
Got it. So you're saying that the 3 reasons why this entire system is broken is because of lack of teachers,
Lack of teachers.
this university affiliation which brings in norms that do not dictate the quality of education, but what is being taught, and all the unnecessary specifications which kind of paralyze which kind of paralyze the trustees or the management, I would say, which prevents them from giving out great education. And thirdly, like you mentioned, there is so much of auditing that happens about the smallest of things that it becomes quite difficult for them to focus on the real stuff, which is great education. Great. Now tell me, amidst all of this, you are building a college. So first, let's talk about the opportunity in the education space, and then let's talk about Masters Union as a business. Because I know for a fact that education is still easier to give, but then quality education with profit is something that's very difficult. And you've, over the period of time, built a sustainable economic engine, which is tapping onto this huge opportunity of education in India, and you're revenue positive, and you're able to make a profit out of it, which is great, which means that you can then reinvest that capital further and turn this into a large organization which gives out world-class education very, very quickly.
Which can then rank into hopefully a top 10. Perfect.
Yes.
That's the...
So I'm trying to understand the economic engine that you're building through the lens of a capitalist. And I want to start with the market opportunity. Let's start with the market opportunity of education in India. To be more specific, the higher education space, business education space.
Yeah.
Let's start.
So first of all, I'll start by saying that if you're looking to build a public company, if you're looking to become a billionaire, right? And if you want to earn a lot of money and buy a jet, education is not the right space for you.
Acha, okay.
It's not going to happen, right? Because you have to run your institution as a not-for-profit. Okay. So that's at the base of the argument that if you want to become a billionaire, I think there are many other industries that you should target. In education, you will not be able to become a billionaire. You can't go public, right? That's number one. However, you can definitely create a long-lasting, evergreen, timeless institution that will survive centuries, okay? And self-sustaining completely. Now, your question is, what is the opportunity, right? In India, people have no problem paying for an expensive educational program if that program gives the right outcomes, right? And if that program has the right quality, okay? And that is a huge opportunity for people. So if you can create a good institution, even if you were to charge 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs in fees, and you're able to give commensurate value, you will be successful, right? Because India is an aspiring society. People want better than what they have today. People want growth, and education is the only way to deliver that growth to people, right? So people are ready to pay if you're able to give commensurate service. It is like saying that if you go to Agra, and if there is a hotel there that is charging even 10 lakh rupees a night, there will be takers for it because Agra is able to give that commensurate value to the people, right? Or that hotel is able to give that commensurate
Got
value.
it. Just to put it into numbers in terms of the return on investment, if somebody puts in 4 lakh rupees into engineering, they can literally graduate with a 4 lakh LPA package, which gives them sustainably 4 lakh rupees every single year. Similarly, when it comes to business school, you invest 30 lakh rupees. The reason why it sounds very lucrative is because you can actually graduate with a 20-30 lakh rupee package. So you invest 30 lakh rupees once and you keep getting 30 lakh rupees again and again. So the equation becomes very lucrative for somebody to invest.
But
which is,
exactly. So it's like buying a house. Like you can't afford the house today. but you can keep paying off your mortgage with the earnings over a period of time. So similarly, with an education program, with an MBA program, for example, you don't mind paying 30 lakhs by taking a loan because you know, right, that you'll be able to pay off that loan with the rent you receive from the job that you do over a period of time. However, I will say one thing here, that we should not look at education in just this ROI format,
Okay.
right? Going to an institution adds a lot more value to you as an individual than just the job that it gets you at the end of the 4 years. I think that is very important to understand. Like, for example, I met some of my best friends for life in college. There is no value to that, right? I became from a boy to a man in college. There is no value to that.
There's no
right?
price to that.
There's no price to that. Sorry, there's a lot of value to that. It's priceless, right? I, in fact, found my godfather in a swimming pool in my college. Right?
Who's that godfather?
His name is Peter Blair. He's a professor at Harvard who I became friends with. He was a PhD student when I was an undergrad, and he's from Bahamas. And we just happened to be on the same end of the swimming pool at one time. And we started a conversation about cricket, about West Indies versus India. And that conversation became a lifelong friendship. And today, I don't take any major decision in my life without talking to him and consulting with him.
Wow.
Right?
Very beautiful.
Very priceless. So, college and those 4 years or those 2 years of MBA add a lot more value than just that job that it gets you. A lot of people start their companies while in college, right? And I mean, imagine the ROI if Mark Zuckerberg was to calculate it, right? Like, okay, I gave Harvard $100,000 and now I've made what, 1 trillion, right? There's no, so sometimes you can't value it like that. But for most people, I understand that's how they think. So let's go with that.
Got it. So the first point of opportunity is that it's a high ticket business which results into very high outcome. Not so with not a lot of difficulty. You put 4 lakh rupees in for engineering, it's not very difficult to get you a 4 lakh LPA job. So that's the first opportunity, which is high ticket, high outcome, resulting into high revenue.
High revenues. Now, like any other business, at small scale, you will not make any EBITDA. You will not make any margin. But as you start hitting 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 40,000 students, that's when you'll start making some surplus, which you can then start investing in more capital, more research equipment, more buildings, more sports infrastructure, etc., right? And that's how the flywheel starts to run. That's how the business starts to sort of run by itself, right? Once you hit a certain amount of scale. So you'll see colleges in India that have achieved some scale, let's say a Manipal, let's say a VIT, let's say an SRM, let's say an Amity, right? We have heard all of these names. They have achieved some scale of tens of thousands of students. And they've reached a stage where every year they're able to plow back that profit into building new campuses and serving the nation even more and more and more.
Got it. So it's a flywheel.
It's a flywheel driven by scale. Right?
Which compounds.
Which compounds like anything, right?
What would you define as a healthy scale? Like for a school, I would say 1,000 students is a good scale where the flywheel can actually start. For a college, what do you think is a good scale? Because I'm thinking about it from the lens of an entrepreneur who today wants to start a college. For example, if I'm thinking about starting a business school, what kind of scale should I aim to achieve in the next 5 years for this flywheel to get started?
There's a very crude way of looking at this, and I'll be a little capitalist about this. If you're trying to build a grade A institution, if you're trying to build an institution for the most aspirational of class, right? If you're trying to compete with Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, if you want to build the top 10, you cannot build it at a very large scale, right? I don't think I can run Masters Union if Masters Union had more than 1,000 students. I think I will fail miserably at my quest, right? So if you're looking to build a grade A institution, 1,000 kids is also stretching it. Like one of India's top business schools, or I think all of India's top business schools, IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, ISB, are all sub 1,000. Because they know that as soon as they cross 1,000 or more or beyond, they will not be able to deliver the quality that they are promising.
1,000 per batch?
Total.
Okay.
Right? Because that's the amount of faculty you'll be able to get. That's the amount of services you'll be able to give them, etc., etc. However, if you're trying to educate the masses, right? If your fee structure is low, around 4 or 5 lakhs, right? And you're trying to educate the masses and you're not really going after the top 10 ranks, right? And a little bit more modest in your aspiration, then you can go up to 10,000 students also. But with 10,000 students, to get into top 10 will be tough. It will take you a long period of time. It is achievable, definitely, but it will take you a very long time, right? Harvard Business School, which is the #1 business school, still till today has less than 1,000 kids in every batch,
In every batch.
in every batch. So in total, they have maybe 2,000 students.
Got it.
Most other schools, and that's probably the largest business school, most other schools are smaller than that. However, if you look at now, let's say, and I'm sorry that I'm using the word grade B, but I just mean more universities that target masses, like Ohio State in the US, or let's say like a Amity or VIT in India, that is targeting slightly a larger crowd. They're 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. And if you are building good processes, systems, SOPs, software, then you can even push to 40, 45,000. The largest university in India in one campus would probably have 40, 45,000 students.
Perfect. Great. So, Flywheel is very difficult to build, but once you build, it compounds. For grade A college, you should not go beyond 1,000. So, the aim should be 1,000, which is significantly less, but it's good considering the fact that it is at least in sight. And then if you want to build, let's say, a tier 2 college, then you can aim for a scale of about
And
45,000.
tier 2 is not bad. Let's not use tier 2 in a negative sense. Whenever we say tier 2, we say it's not tier 1, right? But you also need tier 2 colleges because India as a country needs colleges that can also educate the masses, right? And so they are tier 2 not by design, but by compulsion. And even tier 3 or tier 4. And there's a space and market for tier 1, for tier 2, for tier 3, tier 4. And tier 4 is not necessarily bad as compared to tier 1.
Bro,
It is
but
just,
most of them are bad, bro.
they're solving a different problem. Look at
How
India
are they
where we
solving
are.
a problem?
Look at India. Look at where we are today, right? If I can't afford a 30 lakh rupee tier 1 MBA, right? So does that mean that I don't even go for an MBA?
Lekin if you go for an MBA and then you stay unemployed without any skill sets, then आपका
I
10
think
लाख
that
का
is
तो
wrong. I think that is wrong. Definitely. I think that needs to be improved. But still, at least I should get the opportunity.
हाँ तो आप बोल रहे हो लो टिकट में प्रॉब्लम नहीं है मैं बोल रहा हूँ लो टिकट लो क्वालिटी में प्रॉब्लम है
Low ticket, low quality, high promises में problem है.
हाँ एंड मोस्ट ऑफ देम आर लो टिकट लो क्वालिटी हाई प्रोमिसेस
So if you're doing a wrong promise, right, that is obviously fraud, right? I will use the word fraud for it. If you're promising the world and not delivering, then that's fraud, right? Let's keep that aside for a second and we'll address that. But if you're coming with the right intent, right, and if you are promising what you're delivering, then even tier 4 is adding a lot of value, right? It's not the best education, it's not the highest quality education, but by paying 4 lakhs, am I at least able to enter the job market? Right? I'm not going to become Bill Gates tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to build a large company. That's okay. But at least can I raise my family? Yes.
या
Right. And there is space for that.
perfect now let's talk about the market and you mentioned this stat while I was speaking to you while doing the research for Masters Union that is X number of people graduate and here's the package that they get so there's a huge gap in the market so talk to me about that gap with updated numbers
So the numbers have not changed much since then.
Acha.
Yeah. Probably much worse now because AI, etc. is really eating up a lot of the jobs at the top. So in India, we have, as we mentioned earlier, around 4 crore students who are enrolled in college. Right? And so you can assume that 1 crore are graduating every year. Give or take, right? 1 crore are graduating every year. Now, out of these 1 crore who are graduating every year, how many are engineers? You mentioned 10, 11 lakhs. Another 10, 11 lakhs are doing BCom, BBA, right? Another 10, 11 lakhs are doing law plus design plus all the long tails. And almost 70 lakh people are doing BA and BSc.
correct BA and BSc
Now, which of these programs, which of these courses can really get you a job? You have to ask yourself that question.
I think only engineering from what I
Maybe
can
only
understand.
engineering, maybe at some level, some BBA, BCom programs, right? SRCC, Delhi University, etc., etc. Now, my question to you, right? And I think I'd asked you this 2 years ago also, is how many of these 1 crore graduates get a job that pays at least 40,000 rupees a month or almost 5 lakh rupees a year?
75,000
No.
this was the number last time we
No,
spoke
it was 12,000.
it was
It was
12,000
12,000. That's it. Just 12,000 people get a job that pays more than 5 lakh rupees. Now, I'll give you some anecdotal data as well. If you look at the top colleges in India at the undergraduate level that are teaching BBA, BCom, it's SRCC comes to mind, Hindu College, Hansraj, St. Stephen's, they teach economics, Loyola in Chennai, St. Xavier's in Bombay, St. Xavier's in Calcutta, right? These are the colleges that come to mind. Christ College, right? Most of these colleges, if you take all the students, not just the students who get placed, but all the students and come up with the average package, barring maybe 2 or 3 colleges in Delhi, none of these colleges will have an average salary more than 5 lakh rupees. And these are the top ones in India. I'm talking about BBA, BCom right now. In engineering, it's different. If you go to IITs and if you go to computer science departments or electrical engineering departments or sometimes IT departments. There you'll find great salaries, that 1 crore, 2 crore package, Google picking up, and all of those things. But if you go to slightly less aspirational programs, there you will not find the kind of salaries again, right?
Now, is this because of the lack of availability of jobs, or is it because of the oversupply of students, or is it because these students are not
It's a
competent
great
enough?
question. So first of all, this is the data. Okay, I'll give you another very interesting data. This I've been trying to find. I have approximations from various different articles. Tell me how many net new white collar jobs get created in India every year
I have no idea.
that require a degree. Net new white collar jobs get created in India.
I am assuming if 1 crore people are graduating and assuming, let's say, bro, I have no idea, bro.
Okay, so 1 crore people are graduating with a degree, hoping to do a white collar job. They're all hoping to do a white collar job. That's why they went for a degree. Otherwise, they could have gone for a vocational program. Now, by some measure, only 15 to 20 lakh new white collar jobs get created every year,
Wow, which means there's a deficit of 80 lakh
which means there's a deficit of 80 lakhs
every year.
every year. And I'm being very liberal with my data. I'm saying net new, right? So these 15, 20 lakhs don't have to all get filled by freshers only. They can also get filled by people who are slightly higher up with more experience. I'm saying net new white collar jobs overall for senior levels, middle levels, and junior levels is 15, 20 lakhs. So people not finding jobs is actually not just their own fault or even the college's fault. It's just that the economy of India is such that we have too many people. And our economy, while it's growing very, very fast, is just not fast enough for the kind of population that we have. That's just our misfortune, right? However, let me ask you another question. Tell me how many chemist shops are there in India?
My random guess would be 1 million.
Around 2 million. Okay. How many gold retailers are there in India?
4 million.
Slightly less. I think it's 1 million or something.
1 million. Okay.
In that zip code, right?
Okay.
How many kirana stores are there in India?
10 million.
Almost, I think, between 10 to 20 million, 1 to 2 crores, right? How many tapris are there in India?
Tapris.
Tapris, yeah, a small, unorganized restaurant, essentially, right? Where the food is being cooked in real time.
30 million.
No, I think it's again between 10 to 20 million. So you're right in the magnitude, right? So what I'm trying to say is that this is true India. True India is running chemist stores, is running tapris, is running restaurants, is running kirana stores. This is where the employment actually is, right? And a lot of people, they're not choosing to go into the corporate sector, which is very small. They're choosing to work with their parents, their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, their taujis, their chachas in these kind of stores. That's where true India's employed. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is that to work in my dad's chemist shop, do I really need an MBA?
Correct. You don't.
Those are the questions we have to ask. And I think the mistake that we have made as a country is that we have glorified education. Or, sorry, let me put it a different way. We have glorified college education. That only if you have an MBA, right, no matter what job you do, are you the true son of the soil. Like we have attached these privileges with these stamps, which they don't deserve, right? And which India doesn't even need. And I wonder why that has happened. And I'll ask you the question, like, why do you think we as Indians worry so much or find so much excitement in these tags, MBA, BTech?
Because of validation, bhai. आप देखोगे, you speak to any parent who's enrolling their children into education, into engineering, ask them, why are you getting a child to choose civil engineering? तो उनका standard job रहता है. इसमें ना बहुत scope है. What the hell? How the hell does that make any sense? And I think one of the reasons why my generation at least feels a lot of baggage is because we're often treated as trophies in front of neighbors and relatives for our parents to say, देखा मेरा बेटा यहाँ पढ़ रहा है,
Social validation.
मेरा बेटा वहाँ पढ़ रहा है. And because I got selected into a very terrible college, my parents did not have that badge. So there my load went away. That ठीक है, IIT नहीं गया, ये नहीं किया, वो नहीं किया. My parents accepted that he's not the child whom they can, he's not the child who got into IIT. So he's not the child with the stamp. There my baggage went away, from where I actually started my real growth. So I think this happens primarily because parents often treat their children as trophies as their certificates, and they often burden their children with their unfulfilled dreams. That I couldn't become an engineer, so I'll turn my son into an engineer. But very few of them think because I couldn't become an entrepreneur, I will turn my son into an entrepreneur because उसमें risk बहुत
Risk
ज़्यादा है.
averse, yeah.
And there's a very simple anecdote that when it comes to running a business, we read these stats saying that, only 1% businesses actually succeed, this and that, and all that crap. But what most people don't realize is that when you're at a job, not a lot of things are in your control unless you're working for a great organization. In fact, in my organization over here, a lot of my editors, my writers, in fact, every single person, because I run a very small organization, everybody has their work in their control. In fact, yesterday we held this meeting to understand what does each person want, what does everybody want to do. We spoke to our editors, each one of them, to ask them, भाई तू क्या करना चाहता है और हम क्या करना चाहते हैं, तो दोनों ना एक डील करते हैं. It's like a debt that you have to pay to the market, that you do some of the work and then you get to do some of the work that you like, even if it does not make any business sense. So unless you're in a great organization that is liberal enough, not a lot of things are under your control. But most of the organizations are places like, I don't want to name IT companies, but most of these IT companies where you do not have any choice to hack your growth. But look at your Dadaji's mithai store. He had the growth in his own hands, where he could go from selling chai to biscuits to then
The
sweets.
destiny is in your control.
The destiny is in your control, and your ability to think on your feet is what always helps you. And most businesses that go out of business, and I've learned that with experience after I've grown up, I've seen a lot of my friends also fail, is that they just don't read enough and they don't strategize enough to take business under their control. But our parents never looked into any one of these things. If you tell them that I want to go abroad and you have to take up a debt of 60 lakh rupees to pay for my college, they would happily say yes. They would bet their life savings for you to go to a different country which they have no idea about, in a market which they have no idea about, and bet their life savings. But if
they'll
you
not
tell
give
your
that
father,
loan, yeah.
if any middle class child tells his or her father कि पापा मेरे को ना business करना है, मेरे को 5 लाख रुपए दे दो, they would say इसमें risk है. How does that make any logical sense? बच्चा 5 लाख रुपए लेगा, फेल हो जाएगा, दुनिया के बारे में बहुत सारी चीजें सीखेगा, तो बेहतर एम्प्लॉय तो बन जाएगा. In fact, my boss
Failed
told me.
entrepreneurs are the best employees.
Yeah. In fact, my boss told me when I was working at Reliance, he's the only boss that I had and I would consider him to be the best. Now he's almost like my brother. He told me back then that मैंने उनको बोला सर धंधा नहीं चलेगा तो क्या होगा? I had this, I was very scared of going to the market. तभी अर्जुन मुझे बोला कि क्या हो जाएगा? तू जाएगा एक टपरी चलाएगा, तेरे से नहीं हो पाएगा, लेकिन तू सीखेगा कि क्या नहीं करना है, मार्केट में ट्रांजैक्शंस कैसे होते हैं, एंड दोस लेसन्स आर सच intangible, invaluable lessons that no school or no college can teach you. So you can come back to this organization, and wherever I am, I will hire you because I know for a fact that you've gone to the market, you've learned lessons the hard way, and then you're coming back.
One more thing I'll add to that. I think we're also overestimated risk, right? I think we, in the startup sphere, where you're going for large companies, you want to build a large startup, you want to go public, there the risk is very high of failure, right? Because success means going public. Anything that's not going public is failure. And there the success rate is truly 1%. I'm with you on that. But if I'm going to open a chemist store, if I want to become a small entrepreneur, I want to sell plants, I want to sell furniture, there's a very high chance, probably more than 50%, probably closer to 70, 80, 90% that you will be successful. Right? And I think we have to start looking at those kinds of businesses as well. It's just that in media, we only make movies on Mark Zuckerberg. Right? So we look at that as the idea of entrepreneurship and not opening a tapri on the side, right? I think that can make for a great business
True.
as well.
In fact, this is what bothers me a lot, that when it comes to parents, what they don't realize is that they're burdening children with even higher risk because they did not step back and study the data. Only for the child to realize 6-7 years later that I did not want to be in Canada, I did not want to be in USA, I did not want to be in US, I just want to go back home and do what I wanted. In fact, over there, you first have to clear your debt, then hope that, the administration that is governing the country does not push you off. Then you're still treated as a second-class citizen. Racism, और US में तो बंदूक भी चल रहा है भाई. Okay, so if the same child is given opportunity over here for our country, in our country, the market that the child understands, there's a much higher chance of success. And this is what I think is wrong with our system, which is where Our parents do not study data and they treat children as trophies of validation in the society, in the race of which they end up killing their dreams. And the real dream to say that, my child bought me this Ferrari
Yeah.
or this house is something that they're compromising to say that, my child went to an IIT. So that I think is a big, big problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think so. I think we've clearly identified the market opportunity. I think there's also something we should address, which is the market gap, right? And you asked me this earlier, which is why are these colleges not able to do a good job, right? And I gave you this answer that, hey, let's blame the government, let's blame all of these. But I think it's, education in India is not all that different from education abroad also.
Really?
Yeah. Like we think that some Harvard is doing something crazy or Oxford is doing something crazy. I think maybe the top 5 are. But after the top 5, top 10, I think the books that are being prescribed are essentially the same books that a college in India, a tier 4 college in India is prescribing. Right? The teachers who are teaching are probably just as good or just as bad as a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 college in India. I really think that we have glorified Western education. For the reason that they have those top 10, we think the top 100 and the top 200 are also as good. They are not, right? Let's be very honest there. And the reason is the same thing, right? That in the Industrial Revolution time, this K-12 system, this 4-year college system got created, where it was almost like an assembly line, where you said that, hey, we need people who can work in the factories 9 to 5, so let's make college also 9 to 5. Let's give them one break in the middle for lunch, right? Make sure that they don't ask too many questions and just listen and then take an exam at the end. Make sure they all have roll numbers, right? So they can be easily identified and their individuality is taken away from them, and make sure they have uniforms, right? So that they don't think of themselves as individuals. Make sure they don't ask critical questions. Make sure they don't have creativity. In fact, there's a king, the Prussian king, is very popularly known to have said that if my people start to think, who will fight in all the wars that I have to fight?
Oh, damn.
Right? And by the way, this is the same guy who invented the modern K-12 college system. He invented it because he lost a war to Napoleon because his people were not disciplined enough. So he created this entire education system to discipline his people, to indoctrinate his people, right? That you sit in class, you sit quietly, don't talk. However, and this was good enough for the Industrial Revolution time as well. And this is pre the invention of cars. This is pre the invention of internet. This is pre-relativity. This is the education system that was invented. However, today, we still use that same education system from that relic, right? When the world has completely changed. And that's why the education system needs to change. It cannot be. So for example, today in the workplace, collaboration is required, right? But in our colleges, collaboration is almost looked at like cheating.
Cheating. मैंने तो बहुत collaborate किया है.
Right? In the real world, you are required to think independently, autonomously. But in colleges, in schools, we are required to follow the syllabus, right? And not go beyond the syllabus. What are we required to do? We are required to go through the past exams. We are gaming the exams by
Which
doing
is
the
so
past
stupid.
exams, which is so stupid. In the real life, there is no past exam, right? So whatever we are doing in school is completely antithetical to what is required in college. This is K-12, college, MBA, PhD, everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's why the market gap is that we need to think about a new education system that goes beyond exams, lectures, grades, slides, attendance books. This is a relic of the past. We need to start thinking about what to do in the future. With AI coming in, this need is even more grave now.
Yeah. Which is to think critically.
To think critically, to think innovatively, those are the exact skills we do not teach. In a college system, students are required to not speak and listen to the teacher. In the real world, you're only asked to speak.
Correct.
You're rewarded if you speak and if you rebel and if you have new ideas, right? Those are the people who are doing well. But we are actually incentivizing the complete opposite in school and in colleges. And that's why I'm so passionate about thinking, at least, about how can we rethink the classroom experience.
Got it. Pratham, talk to me about the financial opportunity over here. Because I was having this conversation with a friend of mine and he told me that तू कितना ही बड़ा कॉलेज बना लेगा. Like if you want to provide world class education, आपको 40-50 लाख चार्ज करना ही पड़ेगा बिकॉज आप प्रोफेसर्स को नहीं, आप प्रैक्टिशनर्स को लेकर आओगे, आप इन्वेस्टर्स को लेकर आओगे, एंड ऑल ऑफ दीज पीपल require a lot of money to be spent either as remuneration or for their stay and accommodation as well. It requires a huge amount of money, especially if you're going to have practitioners come into your college very, very often, especially to deliver a lecture. Like if I were to get a lecture delivered by somebody of the stature of Sanjeev Bikhchandani, I have to make everything worth his time, right? So there are a lot of constraints that say that, like you mentioned, education is not a scalable business if you want to do something world class. Okay. But here's where the venture capitalist in my head says that if it's not scalable, if it's not going to make a lot of money, why do you do it? Whereas the patriot in me says that it doesn't really matter how much money it makes. I want to leave a legacy for India. But I know for a fact that, after having studied a few charts that you sent me, I understood that there's a huge opportunity in terms of profits also in this business, provided you fall out of the system and create an impact. So, talk to me about the financial opportunity when it comes to building a B school in India.
So I'll talk about building a college. Engineering, business school doesn't matter, right? If you, let's say, have 10,000 students and you charge a fees of 1 lakh rupees per year, right? That's 100 crore revenue. Okay. You can probably hit 20-30% margin there.
20-30%?
20-30%. That means
Gross or net?
Net.
Net.
Yeah. Gross is much higher. Net is much lower. So 20% net. Now that 20 crores that you've just surplused, you can't take it in your bank account, by the way. That's the Indian government does not allow that, right? So, but you can take that 20 crore and create space for a new campus, an expanded campus. You can take that 20 crore and buy an electron microscope. So now you can do more research, right? And you can keep plowing it back, and that's how you build a much larger university. Now, your point was very valid that you cannot create a scalable, good quality institution. 100 crores to 1,000 crores. I mean, if you do really well, you'll reach 1,000, maybe you'll reach 50,000 students. Maybe you can charge 2 lakh rupees. You'll reach 2,000 crores, 1,000 crores in revenue. That's where the system finishes.
But like you said, the quality will dilute, right? As we have more and more students.
The quality will definitely dilute as you have more and more students. But the student is going to be still happy because the student is getting commensurate value, right? He's paying 2 lakh rupees. He's getting a job, or he's paid 2 lakh rupees per year for 4 years. That means he's paid 8 lakh rupees. He's getting a job that pays 8-10 lakh rupees. He's happy. The quality of education is, yes, less than the quality of education in a college where there are only 100 students. Of course, goes without saying. But at least the student is able to get that value somewhere.
So the possibility of world class at a 10,000 student scale is not possible.
It will take 100 years. Harvard takes how many undergraduate students in a year? Maybe 2,000, right? Penn, where I went, my entire class was just 2,200 students. It's a 200-300-year-old university. There's a reason they have not gone beyond that, right? It's because they know that as soon as they go beyond that, they will not be able to deliver value.
Got it. It's not for exclusivity.
It's not for exclusivity.
Most people think it's for exclusivity.
They're not designed it that way. If you go to Penn's campus, it's full. Like all the classrooms are always full. All the hostels are always full. That's the amount of people they can accommodate, right? And if they start to build more and more and more, they know the systems will start breaking, right? It will not scale. So education will scale conservatively 10 to 20 crores if you're building a small college, all the way to 1,000 to 2,000 crores if you're running a very successful large college with great placements. Got it. Right? That's really the purview of the financials. But you can have interesting models for the future, right? Why do you have to depend on full-time faculty only? Like you mentioned, you can have practitioners. Interestingly, practitioners cost a lot less than full-time faculty because full-time faculty, you have to pay them, you have to pay for their rent, you have to pay for everything, you have to pay for their car, you have to pay for their travel and research, etc. With visiting faculty or with practitioners, you don't have that overhead.
For them, it's mostly charity.
They do it with many of them even do it for, you mentioned Sanjeev ji. He came to our campus, right, for a couple of hours, and he gave some great lessons to our students. Nitin Kamath gave some great lessons to our students. I can't afford them,
correct,
as faculty, but they came because they feel for it, right? So, you can create these new models which can make the education cost actually come down quite significantly. For example, most colleges today most colleges are designed in a way that they own the land and building that they're built on, right? So you have to spend 20 crores to buy the land. Then you have to spend 60 crores to build the building on top of it.
This is for a capacity of?
This is for a capacity of 1,000 to 2,000 students, right? Now that's a huge capex requirement, and then automatically brings down your bottom line, and it creates a huge barrier to entry. But what we have done at Masters Union is something different. We said, boss, we don't have to own our own land and building. Let's just do this where we rent it from the best builder in the country. So we went to DLF. We went to their campus where they already have Bain, BCG, Bank of America, Expedia, Gartner, WPP, and we asked them, sir, the ground floor is empty. Can you please give that to us? We want to run a college there. Now suddenly that 100 crores that had to be spent is zero for me. Right? This is a new model. So you can now think about changing the education system even from a financial perspective, from an investment perspective. And that opens many new doors for both new entrepreneurs to come into education. Now you don't need 100 crores. You can just do it literally for zero. We started Masters Union with a total investment of less than 1 crore rupees. Right? If you add, like, let's say even my time, etc., it would go up to maybe 1.5, 2 crore rupees. My team's time, etc., some of the founders, etc. That's it. And today we have almost 1,000 students. Right? With almost zero investment. Most of the investment we made was after we made the revenue and we made some profit and then we plowed that back in.
Understood. So if I were to summarize this, what you're essentially saying is that education is a high ticket, high outcome business which results into a flywheel which can help you build a large business. Considering the fact that there is a disclaimer, you can't take this money out because in India you can't make money out of education. Then you mentioned that this results into a flywheel, which is very, very interesting, and you can plow it back and then turn them into large institutions with very high impact. And then you mentioned the gap in terms of the requirement that there are 4 crore graduates. Out of them, only 12,000 get a job paying 40 to 50,000 rupees, which means there's a huge gap in terms of 3 things. One is we need more jobs, which is something that the government has to do and the large businesses have to do. We have no role to play over there. Number 2, there is a lack of skill set, which is where people like you and I come in. And number 3, you mentioned that we need to decrease the barrier to entry in such a way that we can charge. There are 2 models you mentioned. The first model is you charge less, but you have more inflow, which is like a VIT, where you have 10,000 students. Or
VIT is also very expensive, but yes.
You go niche and then you build a high ARPU, low scale business like Harvard, which can then help you build leaders for tomorrow. And then when we spoke about the margins, the financial opportunity, what you mentioned is that if you build a 100 crore business, you can get 20 to 30% net, which is super healthy. Like for most of the FMCG, it's less than 10%. So it's absolutely fantastic. And then you mentioned that there are 2 barriers to entries that you can actually get rid of. Number 1 is when it comes to faculty, there's a very counterintuitive thing that most people don't know. That is the likes of Sanjeev Bikhchandani and the rest. They will not charge you to come and teach. They would just do it they would just do
for
it
their own
because,
gratification.
They would just do it because they would simply do it because they want to give back. So it gives you the insane ability of being existing in modern India, where there are practitioners who would want to give back to the society and they would also dedicate time for it. The second thing that you mentioned is the land and building cost. A 20 crore cost with a 60 crore building cost would result into 80 crores of initial capex, which then, if taken as debt, would last for probably 3 decades, and that would practically kill your bottom line. But now that's not necessarily the case, because if you can lease, not buy, it would bring down the barrier to entry by a large extent, just like you did with DLF, where you leased a place instead of buying it.
And one thing I will add, you mentioned scale. I alone at Masters Union cannot achieve scale. It's not possible, right? And I've told my team that don't expect huge companies, like it's not going to happen. However, we have created a model, this asset-light model, this practitioner-driven model, this hands-on experiential model. And we have open sourced it completely. All of our curriculums, all of our SOPs, all of our policies, all of our handbooks are completely available to anyone who wants
Really?
to set up a college. Yes, completely.
Where, bro? On your website?
On our website, on our YouTube, everything is public. All of my courses that happen inside the classroom, they are beamed live on the LMS and anybody can go and check it out.
Wow, I did not know this.
Absolutely. Not a lot of people do, right? But everything that we do is completely open source.
Oh, wow. Did you know this?
So like, for example, we have this one course that is taught by on creators and on creator economy by Tanmay. It's on our YouTube. Anybody can go and see it.
Yeah.
It does great content marketing for us as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whatever is happening inside the classroom, we have put it out in the open.
Bro, you should speak about this more often. You don't.
No, I haven't. Yeah.
This is insane. I never knew this.
Everything is public. Like on our website, if you go, you will find the details of the drop shipping, the creator challenge, of all of the briefs that we do. It's all there. It's all there. The venture initiation program, all the content that we have created is completely out there for public to consume. Now, because of that, there are many new colleges that have been created that completely mimic the Masters Union model. There's a college in Bangalore, in Bombay, in Siliguri. There's a college, and I'm so proud of them, and proud of them, right, for thinking and taking this ahead. Harvard gave us a model. UPenn gave us a model that spawned thousands of other universities across the world. Oxford, Cambridge gave us the model, right? IITs, IIMs gave us the model. But I think it's time for us to bring a new model, and that's what I'm trying to do. My impact is not going to come from Masters Union. My impact is going to come from the hopefully thousands of other colleges that will use the learnings that we have had.
So your real achievement would be the Masters Union model that eventually serves India and not just Masters Union as a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And think about it. Harvard is Harvard. And when it became Harvard, the Harvard business case studies now get used in every college. Correct. Right? One of the reasons I want to be top 10 is because if we can get to top 10 with this experiential, practitioner-driven, asset-light, hands-on model, then perhaps other colleges will be like, "Yare, kya kar rahe hain ye log? Dekhte hain." Right? And I know for a fact that that would give better outcomes to the students eventually.
Bro, you mentioned Harvard and Harvard business case study. That is an inspiration for us.
Yeah.
You remember I told you
Yeah,
that
you told me, yes, of
we
course.
want to make case studies so good, so entertaining that people should say that, you know what, this is more interesting than Harvard. This is giving us more knowledge than Harvard. Now that's a very big bar, but we're trying to get there with each passing video. So like you mentioned, like if Harvard Business Review never existed, Think School's case studies wouldn't exist. And because now we've started with this case study, in fact, 2021, we were one of the 2-3 YouTubers who were making content on business case study.
Now everybody is.
Now everybody is.
Including us, yeah, absolutely.
And that makes us so
We're
happy.
inspired by you.
Thank you so
in
much.
that
bro.
sense, right? Like, absolutely, we always say that, hey, this is a great model of education that Think School is working on. Let's copy it. Let's copy it. If someone's doing a good job, let's copy it. Why not? It will help the country at the end of the day. I mean, it's so, and that's why, I never, and some, you mentioned the hate that we get sometimes. It's when we get compared that we are going to kill IITs or we are going to kill IIMs, right? Or someone makes a claim that, Masters Union is the next Harvard. None of that is true. None of that is true. We don't want to be compared to anybody. We are here because of them, right? We want to present an alternate strategy. That's about it. And the world will decide whether it's good enough or not for us to really unseat them. But the goal is not necessarily to unseat them, right? The goal is to present an alternate model that is good enough, right? That people feel compelled enough. So I'll give you a very interesting example. The earliest universities were Nalanda and Takshila. We have those ruins and we have heard those stories. Then came Oxford and Cambridge. But these were only available to very few people, like maybe less than 0.01% of the population at that time could attend universities like these. In the 1700s, something very interesting happened. The education model changed. The rich people, or the second tier to rich, like not the princes, but maybe like the ministers' sons, etc. The rich people across the world, right? So Maharaja's kids in India, their ministers' kids. Then the Ming dynasty in China was going on, their kids, and even the princes, etc. in the British lineage. What they would do is they would send their kids on a 4-year tour of Europe, starting in Rome. They will end up in Rome. They will meet the Michelangelo of the time, etc. And they will actually learn those skills from them, the masters. From there, they'll go to Florence. They'll learn about art and architecture there. From there, they'll go to Venice. They'll learn about civil engineering and structures there. From there, they'll go to Manchester to learn about textile engineering. So them going to college, their rite of passage was essentially them traveling through Europe. This was called the Grand Tour. And this is what college was.
How long did this last?
I mean, this lasted almost, I think, good 100, 150 years.
No, I mean the course.
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. And I have a very interesting question. There's a company that you know of and most of your audience knows of that actually used to run these stores. Perhaps the first college, if you will. What is the name of the company?
I can think of the company that does what?
That started doing these grand tours of taking students across Europe and making them learn these skills
Okay.
in all of these centers.
Is it Thomas Cook?
Yes. How did you know?
Because you told me,
Acha,
bro.
I've told you, acha. We've had this conversation before. Okay. It's Thomas
मुझे-
Cook.
मैं बोला कि कुछ तो था मेरे को याद नहीं आया था
Okay,
but
okay,
मुझे
you
याद
heard
आया.
this. Okay, you cheated a little bit, but it's okay. It's Thomas Cook, right? And that is an education model that we have totally forgotten about. That education through travel, right? And I really feel that in the future there'll be many more education models like this. With AI coming in, we are not too far from a chat GPT like interface with a bunch of teachers who at our pace, keeping our personality in mind, the accents that we understand and the examples that we appreciate will be teaching us. I think it's 1 or 2 years away.
In fact, what you mentioned is already happening, bro. We were just looking at one of our physics textbooks. It's called IE Rodo. One of the toughest physics books you will ever come across. Okay. Back then, in fact, उसका solution भी था नहीं. कई और लोगों ने उसका solution बनाया था, but बहुत सारे solutions accurate थे, बहुत सारे नहीं थे. बस उन्होंने final answer डाल के बहुत सारे flawed books भी ऐसे निकले. But today we have the luxury of chat GPT. और मैंने ना out of nowhere मुझे याद आया कि मैंने 5-6 साल पहले ना IE Rodo solve करने की कोशिश करी थी और मेरे से हुआ नहीं. तो मैंने उसको लिया और चैट जीपीटी में डाला और मैंने बोला कि मेरे को सिखाओ भाई. Bro, chat GPT broke it down so well that I could understand an IE Rodo question and its solution so well. Because in IE Rodo, you first have to understand the question. That's the first challenge and then you can go to the answer. And I had a lot of doubts and I kept asking. Like you said, at my pace with the examples that I appreciate. And I was just mind blown at that possibility. Because back then, when it comes to physics teachers in IIT classes, आप एक बार पूछ लोगे, 2 बार पूछ लोगे, 3 बार पूछ लोगे, उसके आगे वो नहीं बता पाएंगे क्योंकि उनके पास टाइम ही नहीं है. बट यहाँ पे आपके पास एक टूल है जो मोर और लेस फ्री है टू लार्ज एक्सटेंट एंड यू कैन कीप आस्किंग क्वेश्चंस एंड इट कीप्स गिविंग यू आंसर्स. दे आर सो एक्यूरेट विद सच गुड एक्सप्लेनेशन which means today a kid in 12th standard can look at an IE Rodo, understand the solution, understand the concepts, and then solve IE Rodo. Whereas back then we were struggling with HC Verma,
Yeah.
right? That is such a
You have
beautiful
to call
thing.
your friends. कैसे किया तूने?
कैसे किया तूने?
You didn't have the answer.
We
handy.
didn't have the answer.
Now you have the answer handy. You have the cheat sheet always with you.
Which is so interesting. And how remarkably the capability has changed over just 6 years.
But one thing I will say just to this, this chat GPT and AI solves the problem of content being easily available to us
Yeah.
in whatever format we understand, right? However, it still doesn't solve for one thing, which is the motivation to learn, right? If I am seeking an answer, I will find the answer. But am I seeking the answer?
Yeah.
That's a bigger question, right?
True.
And so what we also have to figure out is how do we motivate intrinsically our students to seek out answers to questions, right? We are not doing a good job of that yet.
That is something that is proactiveness, bro. I think beyond 25, what I've seen is that people, when they are very young, at 14, 16, 18, you can still instill that proactiveness very easily. But as they turn 25 and above, it gets slightly difficult. And as they turn 40 and above, it almost becomes
But
impossible.
like in schools, if we can trigger that curiosity, if we can
Proactiveness.
trigger that proactiveness in students, and I think a good teacher who asks the right questions, a good teacher who can inspire the students or instill that love for that subject, and then the student doesn't need to be taught anything. Once the student is awake, she will seek the answers, whether that's through ChatGPT or through HC Verma or through Rudo, right?
Correct.
I think if we can instill that love for learning, I think then we would have fundamentally changed learning also.
Correct.
Then maybe we would have even removed like the issue of content, right? Like right now we have so many MOOCs, right? Today if you want to learn something and if you have a phone, you can learn it.
Correct.
But has that made everybody learned? Not yet, right? So like I always say this one thing, that we consider that a student is an empty glass and we have to fill our jug of syllabus in it. The other way to look at it is that a student is actually a candle. If we light the candle, it will automatically give light. Right? Another way to look at it is just like, I think every student is a sponge. If you put the sponge on water, it will just float. You have to really squeeze it and then it'll absorb everything, right? Like how we do that, I think your case studies, when you ask and when you frame those questions at the end of your case studies or through the case studies, they inspire that curiosity. After every time I've watched your case study, I've gone into further depth to do my own research on whatever the topic is that you made that case study on, because you awakened that interest in me, right? And now I'm motivated to go and find answers.
You know why we do that? That is because my mom used to do that with me. And you know, one of the best books that I've
Maybe
received
that's
as
where
a
this
gift.
comes from for you.
Yes, and one of the best books that I've gotten is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? And one of the first things that it talks about is proactiveness, starting from the end in mind. And once you begin to understand those attributes, like you mentioned that a candle, right? Lighting that candle, I think, to me was getting that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. मैंने पढ़ा नहीं, but जो मैंने 7 habits देख लिए, मैंने बोला समझ गया. If I can understand the meaning of it and I can inculcate all of that in my life, that would be great. So, and my mom also told me something very interesting. She said, and this is also something that Ken Robinson said in his TED Talk, which is one of the most watched TED Talks in history. He said that the beauty of human mind is that it doesn't need to be taught. It just needs to have a conducive atmosphere and it will learn by itself, which to me was the book. And when we present our case studies, we always make sure that we present the facts and make people think. In fact, all of our podcasts get turned into notes, bro, which is so interesting, which then become 40-50 pages of notes. And that is what excites me a lot, which is people are learning and they're putting it out there for other people to learn from it. And that, I think, is the true impact of education.
You know, since we're living in this world today, we have to talk about Elon Musk a little bit. Okay. Elon Musk has this saying, and this reel is very viral, and I'm sure you would have seen it, that current education system teaches to the tool and not to the problem.
Correct.
Right? So it will teach you how to use a screwdriver. It will teach you what is a heat equation. It will teach you calculus, right? But will not teach you the problem to solve with that tool, right? And so, you know, he talks about heat transfer equations. He said, dude, if I want to teach you refrigeration as a concept or how a refrigerator works, there are two ways I can do it. One is I start with the screwdriver and the heat transfer equation, or I give you a refrigerator. I say, boss, this refrigerator is broken. Please fix it. Right? Now you have made it into a game. It's like a video game for that student. He wants to fix that broken refrigerator. And in the pursuit of that fixing, he will have to learn how to use a screwdriver. But it will come from within.
Correct.
It will not be part of syllabus. He will have to learn those heat transfer equations. It will come from within. And that, I think, is like really like the epitome of what the education system should be. Essentially make it a game.
Yeah. Exam-based education versus challenge-based education.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, right? Challenge, inquiry-based education. This exams really instill this fear, right? And you don't want to learn something out of fear of something. Fear of failing. Of you know what F? We say F is feedback. We say F is fail. But F should be feedback, right? We have to remove this fear. No one thrives in fear.
Correct. Pratham, now let's talk about your businesses, Masters Union and Tether. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to uncover are the models behind both these businesses so that, like you mentioned, these models could be replicated. And what I want to understand are the most important attributes of these models, which can then be replicated by somebody else and turn that into a profitable business schools. And consider this as a conversation between me and you, where I am trying to start a business school of my own, where we are trying to reduce the barrier to entry and hit profitability as soon as possible, with the assumption that I am not raising any capital.
Right? And you want to have impact.
And we want to have impact. Okay. Let's start with step number 1, which is how to identify a gap in the business education market, considering the fact that we already know that it could be profitable, there is a skill gap, and there are too many employers looking for highly capable people. Okay. How do we identify a gap in the market? Like one of your students, he's building a sales school, right? Let's talk about the gaps in the market in business education specifically.
So let's go for 1 second. Let's step back and even talk about education in general, right? So there are 1 crore students who enter into higher education every year. That includes undergrad, postgrad, engineering, medicine, business, law, everything. 1 crore every year, okay? So that's your market, essentially. If you start a new school or a new college today, that's the market you're targeting. Now, 10 to 12 lakhs are engineering students. 10 to 12 lakh are your BBA, BCom students. 10 lakh are your medicine plus law plus design, that long tail. And around 70 lakh is BSc plus BA. Okay. Now that 70 lakh, which is BSc and BA, there the fees is incredibly low, like sub 50,000 rupees a year, which is most of India, right? I'm guessing that's probably not where you would like to start, right? You'd probably want to start in the pre-professional education, which is either engineering, business, or one of these law, design, etc., etc. Right? So you have to start where you feel most comfortable. We were talking about Nitin Gaur, my student who's starting a sales school. He felt most comfortable with sales. That was his passion. That was his calling. He thought, let me build a sales school. Right? For me, it was business, so I started Masters Union, right? For you, again, it could be business. It could be a specific kind of business. Could be marketing, if that's something, or content, or one of those kind of fields. Finance. You're in Bombay, so you figure out where you have passion and where you have a right to win. There is demand everywhere. There is demand for good education in every department, in every discipline, right? Whether it's law, medicine, everywhere. So if you are a good educator, people will come to you for sure. Okay. So you have to start with where you are. So your right to win, let's say, is in content. And you say, Pratham, I'm going to build a content business school where I'm going to teach people how to create this content, how to create content for others, how to really win on YouTube, how to win on Instagram, how to get partnerships, how to get brand sponsorships, how to get deals, all of that, right? I'm going to create a 1-year course on that. And then the second part would be, okay, now we know that this is the school that you want to build. You'll ask yourself, does your audience care about a degree? Okay. If you're going for the postgraduate audience, for a master's program, there the audience does not care too much about the degree because they care about the job that comes after it. But if you're going after the undergrad market, which is a much larger market, right? The postgrad market would be 1% of the undergrad market. Huh? So there you'll have to give a degree, right? And so you'll have to figure out a partner university that will work with you to grant the degree. And you'll have to give them some revenue share, right? So let's say you go to Mumbai University, or you go to Delhi University, or you go to Manipal. You tell them, hey, listen, I want to run this school. Whatever your curricular needs are, that I will accomplish. Don't worry. And my students will take your exams also at the end of the day. And if they pass your exams, then great, right? And let's say they say yes. And now you have finished with your step 2, which is you have a degree partner. Step 3 is that you go find a space, right? Now, traditionally speaking, all colleges needed huge land, huge buildings, 100 crores of capex, as we discussed earlier. But now, with this new model, which is asset light, you can just go to a building owner, a building that is in a location where the ecosystem is very enabling for you. So let's say, I don't know where all the creators in Bombay live, right? Let's say they live in Andheri West. Okay. So you want to build a campus here because you want to be around your ecosystem. So you'll go to a guy and say, okay, I want to build a school in the first year. I'm going to probably have 100 students, right? Per student, you need approximately 100 square feet. That's the rule of thumb. Okay. If you have 100 students, that means you'll need 10,000 square feet. That's the amount of space you need. I know in Bombay that sounds a lot, but in Delhi it's okay. So maybe 8,000 or 7,000 will also do in Bombay. Okay. You close that lease, right? And then you start building a website and you start doing your marketing. The website, you make sure that all of your key messages are delivered. You can do it better than anybody else. And then, of course, I think for you, it's very easy to market yourself and the new school. You just announce that, hey, I'm building this and these are the key messages and these are the key differentiators. These are the kind of recruiters I'll have. These are the kind of opportunities you'll probably have. These are the kind of faculty I have. Of course, I'll be teaching, etc., etc., etc. And thereafter, you go live, right? And then thereafter, whatever promises you have made over the next 2, 3, 4 years, you have to deliver on the promises and more, right? Give students what they didn't even expect so that the word of mouth is strong. And thereafter, the word of mouth will start your flywheel and you'll have a legacy that you'll be sitting on, right? This is assuming you do everything right. Of course, there'll be hiccups in the middle. Of course, there'll be naysayers, many, many, many naysayers, especially people coming from the older mindset, the older generation. You'll have to fight with the parents. You'll have to fight with the chachas and the taujis and the grandparents. But eventually, you'll win.
Got it. So if I were to summarize this, the first step is to find a gap in the market. And this gap is not the gap that is existing in the market only. It is a gap that you are very well capable of addressing, which is your right to win. And your job is to capitalize on that. Because in the business education space, there are multiple gaps that you can capitalize on. For example, one of your students built a sales school only, which is where he felt there is a right to win. Then if you're building for UG versus PG, the differentiator is that when it comes to PG, because it's the students themselves who are making the decision, this output could be something tangible to them, but may not necessarily be tangible to their parents. For example, anything other than a degree, a placement, a founder's office role, and stuff like that. But when it comes to UG, because parents are bound to make the decision, you do this in partnership with a university.
Established university.
And the reason why you would do that is because it helps you get the degree, but because you're complying with the regulations of the university, but you're running the school by yourself, You don't get entangled in that mess of accreditation, affiliation, and all sorts of stuff like that,
As much, yeah.
which will kill your innovation altogether. There will still be some hindrance, but that hindrance will give you the degree, which will then justify the hassle that you're.
And over a period of time, as your brand gets built, 5 years, 10 years down the line, you can either go for university status yourself. You can go to the government and say, hey, listen, I've been running this successfully. Look at my students, look at my alums. Give me and my school a university status. You can go for that, right? Then you will come under UGC, AICT. That's okay. We'll deal with it, right? They're also very, very open to new ideas now. Finally, under the new government, especially since COVID, all these organizations have become very open-minded about getting new ideas. Like you would have heard that recently, they allowed faculty who do not have PhDs to also get professor roles,
Oh, wow.
right? So especially if I've been in the industry for 20 years running marketing and I'm a marketing expert, I have the right to now go and teach, even if I don't have a PhD. So these things are happening.
So, Pratham, now let's come to your story. क्योंकि आपने मुझे बताया था बहुत पहले that there is a flywheel that you need to break. Once you, in fact, there is a ceiling that you need to break through in order to build that flywheel, right? And that flywheel is the flywheel of customer acquisition cost. A lot of these edtech companies have failed primarily because they treated customer acquisition cost as steroids. They thought, let's invest in performance marketing. The customer acquisition cost might be slightly higher, but we'll at least acquire the customers. Initially, it used to cost them 500 rupees to acquire a customer who pays them 10,000 rupees, but eventually the gross margins went down, but the CAC went up so high that eventually they encountered a loss. Okay. Now that is something that is an even bigger hassle, especially when it comes to high ticket products like yours. But then you somehow ended up breaking through that ceiling, and then you ended up into a virtuous cycle where your customer acquisition cost keeps on going down. So first of all, talk to me about this flywheel so that people get context, and then let's talk about how did you break through that ceiling.
Sure. So the flywheel is essentially this, that let's say you have a cohort of 60 students, right? And they graduate and they get good outcomes, whether that's them starting a company successfully, whether it's them going to Shark Tank, or whether that's them raising funds, or whether it's them getting a job, right? That they truly, truly are very excited about. So once you have completed that loop of bringing students in and giving them a good outcome, now they become your agents essentially, right? They essentially become your ambassadors. And when they say good things about you, right, more people want to join, right? And then your CAC becomes lower. Then those 100 new students who come in, they get great jobs, they get great outcomes. Then they go tell another 100 people. And so this pyramid, this compounding keeps happening. And when you hit year 3, year 4, you break that ceiling where your cost of acquisition, because of this word of mouth, becomes really, really low, right? And eventually what starts to happen when you touch year 5, year 6 of sustained good word of mouth is that the cost of application, you have to pay an application fee to apply, right, to a college, that overtakes your cost of acquisition. And hence, by year 5, your cost of acquisition goes in the negative.
Let's understand this with an example. जैसा आपने मुझे समझाया था पहले.
Correct. So now at Masters Union, in the very first cohort, we had 60 students. Okay. They, let's say, paid on an average fees of maybe 2 to 3 lakh rupees when the fees was actually on the website 20 lakh rupees, right? So they almost got a 90% scholarship, right? So it was easy for me to acquire students at such a hefty scholarship. I was able to get good students. I worked very hard on those students. I remember I used to teach myself, spend a lot of time with them, help them with their interviews, help them with their startups, whatever they were doing. And when they finally went into the market, they were happy. I released a placement report, an audited placement report, where I spoke about each of those numbers, right? That what was the average salary, what was the highest salary, what was the mean salary, what was the median salary, what was the average salary in consulting, what were the recruiters in consulting, what were they paying. All of that data in almost like a 10-15 page report, which was audited to add trust. It was audited by the same auditor that audits IIM Ahmedabad's report, right? Once that got into the market, that sort of spread like wildfire, right? There's some new college that has come that is done really well in placements. Now, students who are looking to go into good colleges, they know that, I want to apply to all the top 10 or top 20. Once they see our placement report rivaling that of those current top 10, top 20 colleges, we also become part of their target list.
Got it. So for these first 60 students, what exactly was your customer acquisition cost?
For the first 60 students, because it was basically a full scholarship that I was giving them, all I did was get a PR agency to release a PR piece. I think that went into India Today, that went in Shorts, etc., where it spoke about how this new business school has been started. These are the 3 or 4 faculty that will be teaching. They are the founding faculty, and there is going to be a full scholarship. When in India you're offering a full scholarship, automatically a lot of people will apply. So I remember in the very first year, I got, after that PR release, almost 600 applications.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, an applicant had to pay almost 2,500 rupees to even apply. So we know that those 600 people are all serious. Out of those 600 people, I maybe interviewed 120.
So you're saying that the application fee is absolutely essential, because I'll tell you how the public looks at it, okay? The moment you say application fee, they think you're making money out of their application. But what they don't understand is that, in fact, I would love to do this for hiring as well, where people just pay money just to apply. Because
Only serious people will come.
I'm telling you, bro, even when I speak to recruiters, in fact, I've been facing this problem very often, that you get so many trashy entries that you really don't know how many of them are serious. Only for you to go through this hassle of processing 10,000 applications, then you pick 100, then you realize that those 100, may say 30 are not even serious. So you are losing out on so much energy. So if you just want to cut down the top of the funnel, usually it is about increasing the top of the funnel, right? Here you cut down the top of the funnel. That small top of the funnel ends up generating revenue, which then minimizes your customer acquisition cost. So you're able to do too many things. You're able to get the best students. You're able to generate revenue from day one, which can then be spent into marketing. So it gets you that flywheel started.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay. So these people paid 2,500 rupees. 600 students paid for it. And then you interviewed them.
Then I interviewed approximately, I don't remember exactly, but I think 100, 150 of them maybe. I made offers to maybe 80, 85 of them. And then maybe 60 ended up joining. Also 25 people did not join because they had other offers in other colleges. I was competing, right? But those 60 mavericks took a chance on me.
Got it. Now tell me something, Pratham. I've often heard that, in fact, I haven't heard, नहीं ये तो सच ही होगा, that जितने सारे बड़े-बड़े business schools होते हैं, whether that's Harvard or IIT or IIM, what these colleges do, they have this unfair advantage of getting the most brilliant minds. And once you put 100 brilliant minds under a roof, those 100 brilliant minds, without having to teach them, will end up doing brilliant things. So that's where their flywheel starts. Okay. But when it comes to you, and I understand that you assume that every kid is capable of infinite potential. By the way, I'm not a believer of that. Okay. Every kid is capable of infinite potential, but you still have to get hold of quality entries, right?
They have to be able to speak at least. The basic bar they have to.
Correct. So what I'm trying to understand are the attributes that you saw in them to get them into Masters Union, considering the fact that you had no experience back then.
No, great question. Yeah. So in the beginning, obviously, I was not going to get the 99.99s. Today I do. I'm in a different position, but back then I did not, right? So I was looking for 2-3 things. The first thing I was looking for is this person inherently curious?
Inherently curious.
Inherently curious. Right?
How did you gauge that?
You know, we had this one question in the application. It's a very interesting question. The question was, why does my table creak?
Okay.
Doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
It's a question. It was literally just there. Why does my table creak? And people have to answer that. Now, 99% people will get stumped by that question. What does this mean? Is this a typo? What is this, right? But there's some people who understand what we are trying to do, right? They will get curious. They will try to search online. What is this? What is that? And they'll come up with some interesting answer to that question. They'll play the game with me, right? And that is a great way to find people, the kind of people that I wanted, right?
As in an open-ended question that makes people think critically.
Critically, yeah. Just makes them think critically. They feel, someone wants to take up that challenge to answer a, curveball question. That to me is saying a lot about that person, right? That this person is up for the challenge. He's a little
Can
bit
you
of a
give me a
maverick.
few more examples of these kind of questions?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions. So this was one. Why does my table creak? What would happen if the sun rose in the west? Just answer that question. You can take a philosophical approach. You can take an astrological approach. You can take an astronomical approach. Take any approach. You can take all of them together. You can write a poem against it. Right? So just throw these curveball questions. There's a game. So what we do this year, we have changed it slightly. We make them play literally a Mario game.
Okay.
A Mario style game. So when you apply to Masters Union, you have to play this game. Same we do at Tether also. And this game will test how you do when you have very little time. So we only give you, I think, 25-30 seconds to
This
solve.
is almost like SSB.
What is SSB?
In SSB, this is
correct.
what is-
Acha, service board. Yeah, of course. So you throw these kind of games, like these kind of questions that most people who cannot think originally or critically will get stumped by. right? You may not be the highest ranker in JE, you may not be the highest ranker in your school, college, whatever, but you still might be able to play this game, right? So this kind of game or this kind of question helps us get an insight into the person beyond their grades.
Okay. Bro, a very curious question. Let's say I am an inherently curious person, and this is a problem that I faced even during my college placements. I did not sit for placements, but then while these group discussions were being done, तेरे को मैंने बताया था ना कि what if the sky is red? My obvious reaction to it is, when there are so many real issues to be discussed, why the hell are we discussing about if the sky becomes red, what will happen? Because A, it's not going to happen. B, no matter what we talk, it's not going to change anybody's perspective. C, it's not resulting into anything. Okay. So during those times, because I am inherently a very logical person, I'm a realist, these abstract things sound like futile things to me, because of which I might just decide not to answer that question in the first place. But if you give me a question on, let's say, socialism versus capitalism versus communism, I will be able to give you a very comprehensive answer based on real stats and data and case studies, that here's where capitalism fails, here's where socialism fails, here's where communism fails.
So we ask those questions also,
Okay.
right? So
Because I'm just trying to understand that if a person like me applies to something like
you'll
why,
be like, what is this?
yeah, what is
Ah,
this?
What is it? No, fair. I mean, see, the thing is, everyone's different. And so we have one application, we have an AI assessment, and then we also have an interview. So there are 3 points of contacts. And in each of those contacts, we ask you a different kind of a question, or we engage with you in a different way. In one of the years, we even tried this thing where we made people finish a scavenger hunt in Gurgaon. Right, so we actually partnered them into teams. We called them to campus. We partnered them into teams, and we gave them a list of things they have to finish in Gurgaon together as a team.
So how does this scavenger hunt in Gurgaon tell you about the student?
No, so the way it's very interesting. So we don't judge the student then, and the students judge each other. So when they come back from the scavenger hunt, we ask them to write a few lines about their team members. And from those responses, we try to judge who we want in the cohort or not, right?
Got it. Can you walk me through a few examples of a bad apple and a good apple?
You know, it's generally, we sit, there are 5 of us in the admissions committee, we sit down and all of us debate on each candidate, right? So you might say, Pratham, no, this is a great candidate. I might say this is not a great candidate, right? And then we'll go with the majority at the end. It's usually a debate, and it's often a heated debate as to who we should take in the cohort, who we should not. So, you know, sometimes some people are very quiet, right? And in a scavenger hunt setting, they may not be able to truly be very open, right? They may not be as extroverted in that. And so they might be losing out. But when you're sitting in the admissions committee, and one of the feedback on one of the students is that the student was very quiet, then we'll check other attributes of that student. What else has he done? Like, has he still gone above and beyond and tried to help the cohort or his team in any other way, right? So these debates happen that really help us understand who the student is as a person beyond their grades, right? It's very easy to judge a student from their GMAT score, from their SAT score, from their JE score. We said, let's not do that, right? Let's try to really get to know the person. In fact, when we do the interview, we ask the interviewer to answer a question after the interview. Will you like to have beer with this candidate tonight?
This is the Zomato test, right?
This is kind of like the Zomato test, exactly. We actually ask that question. And some people may say, no, I would not like to have a beer with him. That does not mean that that student is rejected. That just means that we have one more data point to judge that student when we are discussing and debating his application in the group.
Got it.
Right?
And
So we just collect all of this data.
what would you consider as a red flag to not take the student in?
You know, if we find too many inconsistencies, right? Let's say in the essay, the student is saying, I'm an extrovert, right? But in his peer review feedback, it's coming out that he's actually introverted. Then we know that kuch to gadbad hai, right? When things are not aligning, when he's saying that, you know, I'm very passionate about quick commerce, but then we don't see any evidence to that effect in his CV, right? Or when he talks about, hey, you know, I read the newspaper, right? But then we see in his CV that he's not really updated his CV with some of the latest things that he should have, whatever. So we try, you know, whenever something like that happens, then the red flag goes up, right? So, and one more thing is that if someone is coming across as authentic and vulnerable across all of these exercises, then we feel like this person deserves a chance, right? That this person will be curious, he will listen to other people, he will not be arrogant, he'll be a sponge, right? More than a rock.
So you're looking for a sponge.
We are
As
looking
in,
for that sponge.
Not the person who knows it all and may not absorb things, but a person who is willing to admit that they don't know a lot of stuff, which is why they're willing to learn more.
Vulnerable, yeah,
Those attributes make up for a great student.
for us. That's the Masters Union student. That's what we are looking for. He may have a 60 percentile in CAT. In fact, there was one video that went very viral that Masters Union has taken a 60 percentiler. I was like, but the kid is amazing.
Bro, you know what? I know you wouldn't say this, but I should say this because these are the same people who will say कि अरे हमारा तो IIM में हुआ नहीं, हम तो बहुत ब्रिलियंट बच्चे थे. ये लोग ही रिजर्वेशन के बारे में बात करते हैं, बोलते हैं कि अरे हमारे पास इतना कैपेबिलिटी था लेकिन रिजर्वेशन के साथ हम जा नहीं पाए. जो कॉलेज ले रहा है बच्चे को उसको तुम गाली दोगे, देखो कॉलेज ऐसे बच्चे को ले रहा है. बाद में तुम गाली दोगे कि अरे IIT उन बच्चों को नहीं ले रहा जिनका जेई स्कोर अच्छा नहीं था लेकिन साइंस में बहुत अच्छे थे, लेकिन वो बच्चे अच्छे थे लेकिन बस उस एग्जाम में परफॉर्म नहीं कर पाए. So bro, just ignore all of that crap. Like I get that frustrated. I don't know how you don't get frustrated.
Sometimes I do, you know, like there's this very interesting Bill Gates. Sorry, not Bill Gates. Bill Clinton actually got a very bad SAT score. Scarlett Johansson actually got a very bad SAT score. Does that make them less successful in life? Not at all. Like SAT scores, JEE scores are horrible predictors of someone's success.
Absolutely.
Or potential. And so we're trying to see beyond those numbers. And so that's how we got most of our students in the first. Over a period of time, as our brand got built, we became spoiled for choice.
You became spoiled for choice. Okay.
Right? So earlier we used to have 600 applications. Now we are sitting on 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 applications. In total, I think this year we'll get probably 10,000 applications across all of the programs. Right? And so now we are spoiled for choice. Now we are like, hey, you know, let's optimize for diversity. Let's make sure we have 2 doctors also in the cohort. They'll add to the conversation in the classroom. Let's make sure we have some students from Nepal and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka as well. Let's make sure we have some students who did their undergrad abroad and now have come back to India. Let's get some students who also have some family business background. Let's get some students who also have a sporting background. Can we get someone from the army also in the cohort? Right? So now with that increased number of applications, we can play all of these interesting.
Talk to me about the importance of diversity, because I've seen this multiple times from foreign universities that we need a diverse cohort from Namibia to India to Europe. We need people from everywhere. Okay. We need people from diverse backgrounds. Now, I don't really understand how does that connect to a great business school experience. So can you help me understand what is the thinking behind this diversification?
You know, I want to give you my personal example. One of my classmates when I was in college that I was partnered up with on a project was Lebanese.
Lebanese.
Yeah,
Okay.
his name is Randy Reyes. He's my co-founder of my first company, Outgrow. Right? The amount that I've learned from him, right, about his part of the world, it literally opened up my brain, right? Because until I met him, I had only been fed a certain narrative about the Middle East.
For example?
Like, I mean, you know what I mean, right? With the Middle East.
No,
in India.
tell me.
I mean, I think we were always given this very Western view of Middle East that, you know, it's terrorism and it's backward and it's, you know, a certain religion being completely extremist, this, that, right? When I met him, right, all of that balloon of mine, that bubble of mine truly burst. Here's a guy who's incredibly smart, who's telling me stories of how Lebanon came to be and what is the civil war going on over there, and how the prime minister and the president and the vice president are always going to be from 3 different religions, and how that absolutely makes no sense, and how when he was a child in a school bus going to his school, when he crossed over a landmine, the car behind him actually completely exploded and he just about got saved, and about how in his community, entrepreneurship is not looked at with any risk, right? They don't think entrepreneurship is risky. You know why? Because they saw missiles every day in the sky, right? So for them, starting a company is not risky. So here's Randy, who left an offer from Silver Lake, which is one of the largest private equity funds, to come and join me and help me build Outgrow, right? My view of Middle East completely changed. I realized how entrepreneurial those people are, just because of the kind of, you know, growth that they've seen. So that's an example. I think diversity, that's why opens your brain, right? It makes your sponge more absorbable, with a higher absorption, right?
Yeah. I understood how inclusive Middle East is when I went to Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
There you go.
Like, the waiter over there is from Czechoslovakia. How do you pronounce it?
Czechoslovakia.
Then the driver is from Pakistan. And you go to the hotel, there you see Indians. So it is so diverse. But from the outside, back then, now Dubai and Abu Dhabi have managed to change their perspective. But then back then, 10 years back, had you asked somebody how is Dubai or Abu Dhabi, they would say, you know what, it's quite exclusive. They don't really include people. But I would say that there are some states in India that everybody's aware of. We have gone there and we felt like this is not our country because people have made us feel that way, right? Because they always value a certain language over others, and they often make you feel as if this is not your country, and there is evident racism that's going out there, right? But now tell me, how does this? How now? I can share my experience with you, but I want to know from you because you are actually seeing this happen on a daily basis. As to how do these experiences shape the business acumen of a person?
No, I think business at the end of the day is a product of your understanding of the world, right? Like, for example, when I started Tether, we are looking at students from all over the world. Currently, we have students from 45 different countries. So I have to understand the psyche of the people in those 45 countries. What kind of marketing message would sell in Japan versus China versus US versus Mexico? What are the kind of key messages that will maybe work in the UK but not in Germany? Right? So I think when you are exposed to people in a college setting from different backgrounds, I think your understanding of the world also becomes that much deeper. So when you're building a product, you build it for the world, not just for Bombay or Maharashtra or India or Asia, but for the world, right? In fact, when I was at Masters Union and only targeting India, I felt that I could do more, which is where the idea for Tether came in. He said, hey, listen, we have a great product. Why not sell from India to the world? And that's how the idea for Tether came in. And we successfully were able to market ourselves in 45 countries, that 120 kids from 45 countries took a chance on an Indian college started by an Indian founder, right? When has that happened before? And I think I could only do that because I had that exposure of all of those people when I was in college. I had friends from all of these countries.
Do these cultural exposures also help you find opportunities in India because you understand that something is better abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. So I learned how to speak Chinese.
Okay. Why?
In college, because you had to take a second language. And I was like, it's either Spanish or Chinese. And to be very honest, I wanted to impress a Chinese girl who I really liked. So I learned Chinese, right? And as a part of my learning experience, I also got to go to China and spend 3-4 months living there, right? And I really understood why Alibaba is Alibaba. What is Taobao? What is Tmall? And these were these large companies in China. This is pre-Flipkart, pre-Amazon coming to India. And so I really understood what the future of India may look like because I could see India from a lens of China.
Give me a few examples.
Exactly this, right? Like when I was in China, this was 2010-11, Flipkart and Amazon had not become a huge thing, right? Meesho had not even been born. And at that time, I'm seeing in China, all of these companies like Taobao, Tmall, Alibaba, really growing, right? I could see like the fintech revolution in China happening before it happened in India. Of course, then India took over with UPI. But I could literally see India's future in China's present.
Bro, you know what? This is what reminds me of Jamshedji Tata. He was also a very passionate traveler, and he understood the value of steel when he was attending a lecture where this lecturer said that the nation that understands the value of steel will reap its worth in gold. Eventually, he came back to start Tisco.
It's amazing.
Understood. So what you're saying is it gives you a perspective into the future when it comes to more developed countries like China. And Sarthak Ahuja told me something very interesting about what happens when you go to less developed countries like Africa. Okay. Have you ever had any experiences of going to less developed countries?
I also studied abroad in Ghana.
Okay.
In Accra. I spent 3 months there as well.
Ghana?
In Ghana.
Okay.
In Accra.
So what did you learn from those experiences?
I think there it's more about identifying opportunities. One thing I found in Ghana, very interesting. They have a huge mosquito problem, right? But how in India we have electric all-outs? I couldn't find electric all-outs in all of Ghana in 2010 summer. मैं ढूंढता रह गया कि यार हो ही नहीं सकता कि इस कंट्री में मस्कीटो की प्रॉब्लम है और इलेक्ट्रिक ऑल आउट ही नहीं है.
Is that because they had a better solution or no solution?
No, they had just learned to live with it, right? What? And I was like, dude, why has no one come to Ghana to sell electric all-outs?
Wow.
By the way, I was too young. I should have done something about it. Maybe I would have built a large company there. But it had still stuck with me कि यार मतलब opportunity थी ना. I had seen something in India.
मतलब जो आप इंडिया में होते हो, just like you could see the future of India from China, you could see the future of African countries
Being an Indian.
and see the solutions to the problems that they are facing if you are in India, but you go over there and you spot the problems. And that's where the marriage of problem and solution happens eventually to result into a large company.
Yeah. My granddad tells me this, that back in the day, there were no modes of transportation, right? You could only perhaps in your lifetime go 100 kilometers in either direction. That's about it, right? Because maybe you had a bullock cart, that's about it. But still, at that time, very early days, you always had pilgrimages. And pilgrimages were made, of course, for religious reasons, but the true reason behind them was for you to really burst your bubbles, right? So that you get out of your echo chamber and see the world beyond your understanding of the world. And I think that's when your perspective truly broadens.
In fact, I was never a very strong believer of Rapido until I saw Indonesia.
Yeah.
And then I read this Ken article which spoke about how bike sharing had become a very big deal in Indonesia. Okay. But then now मेरे को तभी भी समझ में नहीं आया कि how big a deal it was until I went to Bali and then saw what a big deal bike sharing was. And then that's where I understood that there were some similarities between Bali and Mumbai. रास्ते छोटे हैं. You can afford a cab, but if you go by cab, then you will get stuck in traffic. Two-wheelers have a very huge market. So there are a lot of people riding two-wheelers and the income levels are quite similar. India too is very similar to that of Indonesia. And that's when I realized that this is basically India too capitalizing on an opportunity which is now being capitalized in India. But then I was just thinking that had I come over here 10 years ago, I would have seen the evolution of bike sharing, only to realize that it is quite possible, in spite of all skepticism in the world, that bike sharing is a huge market, provided you have small roads, similar per capita income, people being in hurry, and they always wanting to go somewhere where the average order value is quite less. For example, if you go to a mall with your friends and then you're willing to spend 10,000 rupees, then you would obviously take a cab. But what I've also understood is that if you want to go to a kirana store close by, 40 रुपए का दूध लेने के लिए, तो फिर आप cab लेके नहीं जाओगे, right? So it is also based on the nature of the activity and the cost of that activity, which also dictates which mode of transport you take and how much are you willing to spend on it, no matter who you are. And this is what helped me understand, oh my God, this is how you travel to different places, understand similarities like you said, Ghana mein mosquito
repellent nahi hai.
Mosquito repellent nahi hai, and then find a solution which is already existing and you just be a mediator to it,
Trader.
which brings it to life, which is so interesting.
So interesting. Yeah, I know.
Now, when it comes to your students at Teto, now you felt it, I felt it, but that is because we understand the importance of travel, right? All of this happened not by design, but by chance. And you're making this happen by design with Teto. What exactly are the experiences of your students that have brought in practical business lessons by spotting these gaps in different parts of the world?
Now, so the Teto curriculum only is super interesting. So they have to travel to a different country every term. So term 1 is in Dubai, term 2 is in India, term 3 is in Singapore, term 4 is in Ghana, term 5 is in Rio, term 6 is in New York, term 7 is in Milan. So that's the circuit that the students are completing in 4 years. They're spending 4.5 months in each of these countries. In each of these countries, they have to build a business on a specific theme. So in Dubai, they all have to build a e-commerce dropshipping business. When they come to India, they all have to build a D2C brand. They learn about branding, they learn about marketing. When they go to Singapore, they have to build a hardware product and pre-sell it on Kickstarter. Then they go to Ghana, they have to build an NGO. When they go to Rio, they have to build a sustainability green venture. When they go to New York, they have to build an AI rapper. And finally in Milan, they have to build a YouTube channel.
AI rapper, you said.
Yeah, essentially an AI company leveraging existing AI tools, right?
And lastly,
in Milan, in Europe, they have to build a YouTube channel.
YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
Bro, what is the logic behind each one of these subjects specifically being done in a particular country?
Yeah. So basically, when you're playing a video game, you go level 1, level 2, level 3. Each level is increasing in the order of difficulty, right? So dropshipping business that they do in term 1 is level 1 of difficulty. Dropshipping requires basic trading. You have to be able to build a basic website. You have to get some products listed from a supplier, and the supplier only will dropship those products. So you don't have to worry about the last mile delivery, etc. Right? It's a very basic form of business that gets you warmed up for term 2, where you have to build your own brand now. Right? In term 3, not only do you have to build your brand while building a hardware product, but also understand the hardware science and the engineering of it. one level of difficulty above.
So trader, brand, product.
First, term 1 is trading, learn trading. Term 2 is branding. Term 3 is you learn the product also, so on and so forth, right? So every term, you have to build this 0 to 1 journey. And in this journey, you learn something about building a business, right? And your grades come from your revenue, your margin, your profit, your NPS, and your ROAS,
Okay.
right?
But doesn't that really depend on the market that they choose and the product that they choose?
Absolutely.
For example, if I'm choosing a skincare brand, whereas the other person is choosing something like, let's say, ye All Out ka cheese, then the All Out guy is obviously going to make more money than I.
Right?
He's going to make more money than me.
Correct.
But when it comes to my passion lies in skincare. As a result, I'm by default bound to trade with low AOV products. So how do these?
First of all, if it's low AOV, then you should compensate with higher volumes. Let's say you have low AOV and low volumes, but you are passionate about the product, then it will reflect in the NPS. So there'll be some metric that will be going for you, right? And of course, there's a more holistic judgment also that way. It's not only on revenue, right? But what we have found is that when you build a business, let's say in term 1, you have to build this trading business, you'll need some knowledge of accounting because you have to maintain your books of accounts and file for taxes. You'll need some knowledge of digital marketing because you have to run those ads on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere. You'll need some understanding of legalities because you have to build and set up a company in Dubai, which is very difficult to do in some ways for an international student to come in. Now, we have all of these courses.
Okay. Oh, got it. So this is the Elon Musk way that you spoke about.
Correct.
Which is कि रेफ्रिजरेटर में प्रॉब्लम है, इसको फिक्स करो.
Fix करो.
और फिक्स करने के चक्कर में आप समझोगे कि स्क्रू कैसे करते हैं, ठीक कैसे करते हैं, काम कैसे करता है. In this case, there is a business that you're supposed to build. In this case, it's, let's say, e-commerce. So you're essentially a trader, which means website, legalities, registering the company, performance marketing, all of it.
ये सब
You're
समझ आ
supposed to
गया.
understand.
ये सब
And also, you have to understand which product to choose.
Of course, that's the main thing. The market research. You also understand how to do good market research, how to do surveys, how to figure out how to negotiate with suppliers, how to manage RTO, return to origin, because that happens like crazy when you're doing dropshipping. So all of these are things that you learn as you're building the business, and all of these workshops is the curriculum essentially.
Do you provide them with initial capital for this?
So all of these eight businesses that we have identified, if you think about it, they actually require almost zero capital. Because dropshipping does not require any capital because there is no MOQ involved. When you're building a D2C brand, again, you're using guerrilla marketing, Instagram, creating content to sell your product. Again, hardly anything required. When you're doing Kickstarter, it completely depends on your design and your branding and your selling capabilities on Kickstarter, right? So each of these businesses have been identified to not require a lot of capital. And whatever little capital you need, that we will give. Right? So in term 1, we understand that the students need some capital to get started when it comes to performance marketing. So we give them a $500 budget.
Got it. Which also tells them that you can start with zero capital.
Exactly.
Got it. Frugality.
Frugality. But the most important thing is that these are students who have never built a business before. And they've always been told in their lives that get a good job. But now, in term 1 only, when they have made even $5,000 in revenue, there is a switch that turns on in their head. They become entrepreneurial. They realize that they can be paid for something that's not their time.
Correct.
Right? That they can build a business. That if they continue at it, had they gotten the right team, had they gotten the marketing just right, they could have made not just 5,000 but 50,000 also. And the DNA changes. I have seen this DNA change every year for the last 5 years.
Yeah. Pruven, why is there an NGO over here?
When we are in Ghana, right, we realized that there's a great opportunity in Ghana to have a lot of impact because Ghana is really one step behind India in terms of growth, right? And we also want students to appreciate the social impact that businesses can create. We don't want them to become hardcore capitalists. As a college, it's also a responsibility to give them a balance, right? So making them build an NGO, raise funds for an NGO, be really close to the people they are impacting, we feel that also is an incredibly important experience that college should provide. Right? So that's why we chose NGO. Plus, raising funds for an NGO is much harder, right, than raising funds for a business. And so they should also learn that, right? We also want them to be sensitive. We also want them to be empathetic individuals. And I think this does a great job of it.
Got it. So this is empathy. Then let's come to sustainability startup. Is that correct?
Yes. So they have to build something which furthers the green agenda, right?
ट्रेडिंग समझ में आता है, ब्रांड समझ में आता है, प्रोडक्ट समझ में आता है, एम्पैथी समझ में आता है, सस्टेनेबिलिटी का क्या लॉजिक है?
यार इंडिया में हम लोग सस्टेनेबिलिटी की इतनी बात करते नहीं है, राइट? बट वेस्ट में स्वीडन, नॉर्वे, जर्मनी, इवन साउथ अमेरिका, इवन यूएस, everyone's only speaking about ESG, right? And that's a very big part of every business, every strategy.
Explain ESG in 2 lines.
ESG is environment, sustainability, governance, right? So it's how do you make sure that whatever work that you're doing, whether it's mining, whether it's AI, whether it's building furniture, how that is sustainable, how that is green, and how that's not negatively adversely impacting the environment which we live in, right? So all the energy businesses, green energy businesses, renewable energy businesses fall in that category. All the carbon trading businesses, right, where you're actually literally sowing forests and then offsetting carbon with that comes into the picture. So that's a huge economy in the West. With Tether, where we have students from all of these countries, we have to really be mindful about making sure that ESG is a very important part of the curriculum. And one more thing, we were speaking about how to get top 10 ranks. Most rankings make ESG almost compulsory in your curriculum, right? So if you don't have ESG in your curriculum, you can forget about rankings. All these global rankings, they really value both you being ESG compliant and you teaching ESG to students. And Rio is a great place to do it because you're in the middle of Amazon, rainforest, etc. All of that. A lot of very interesting carbon offset businesses can be created there.
Wonderful. बाकी AI और YouTube तो it's pretty obvious. So now let's come back to the Masters Union model. ठीक है, हम टेटर में हमने काफ़ी कवर कर दिया कि ये सारे perspectives है. In fact, that also comes back to Masters Union where you also give students diverse experiences. ठीक है, but before that, I want to understand the model in terms of teaching. ठीक है, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, अगर कोई बी स्कूल का प्रोफेसर है तो एनीवेयर बिटवीन 10 to 20 LPN का पैकेज होगा. ठीक है, बट this is again capex heavy, and the problem with teachers is not the salary that they get, but the experience that they have. For example, when it comes to YouTube is such a evolving space. Social media in general is such an evolving space that had you spoken to me 2 years ago, in fact we did, and I told you different things, and today I'm telling you different things. In fact, when I speak to Ranveer, I hear about different things as to how a social media entrepreneur can turn himself from a scrappy entrepreneur to a full-fledged organization. That's what I've learned from Ranveer, and that's only because he's one of the first people to do it. So when these industries are so quickly evolving, and when it comes to D2C also, 3 years ago, everybody thought D2C is the next big thing. Today, we've understood that D2C is only a marketing channel for you to go offline, but the final destination is offline. Back then, we thought that the likes of D2C will go on to beat the legends like HUL. Now we've understood that these companies are companies that will scale and eventually get acquired by HUL to become a part of the legacy brands. So our perspectives are evolving. So if a professor has 10 years of experience, I wouldn't call that professor the best professor. In fact, I would consider that 10 years of experience to be 10 years of redundant knowledge.
No, my dad says this thing, that if a faculty comes and says that I have 10 years of teaching experience, you don't have 10 years of teaching experience. You have 1 year of teaching experience 10 times over.
Correct. That is
It's not
exactly
the
what I was
same.
about to say. Because that's 10 years of stagnation, right? Because that's 10 years of you being away from the market. And when it comes to YouTube also, if you ask a YouTuber who existed back in 2014 to come and deliver a lecture on how to grow on YouTube, it would not make sense at all. So how do you strike a balance between, but at the same time, full-time professors are important because they are the ones who build a connect with the student, right? They're always there. But for example, when I come to teach at Masters Union, I don't have the luxury, even though I want to, I can't spend beyond a certain time with the students. So how do you strike a balance between getting people who can teach the students the first principles, the concepts, the textbook stuff, which are absolutely important, like customer acquisition cost and lifetime value, at the same time, balance that with the latest knowledge of what's happening in the market, and then marry them together to give the student the perfect balance of the first principles of business and the most important principles of modern business.
You have actually answered my question. You've actually answered your own question.
Okay.
So we have a 30-30-40 model.
Okay.
30%, 30%, 40%. 30% of my faculty that's going to be teaching the students are my full-time faculty who are teaching core first principles business courses, right? Like basics of accounting. I do not need to bring in a McKinsey partner to teach basics of accounting. I need a professor who can really be very rigorous, making sure that हर बच्चे को समझ आ रहा है, right? So for some basic fundamental courses, I use 30% of my faculty, full-time faculty. They're resident. They're on my full-time roles. They're all faculty from IIMs usually who come and teach, right? And usually some of them have some work experience as well. But it does not matter because what they're teaching does not require as much work experience. That's 30%. 30% of my faculty is visiting faculty from abroad, right? These are usually professors from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Wharton. We request them to come to India for a few weeks at a time and teach our students unique and interesting principles that they are doing research on.
Example?
Like for example, we have someone whose name is Edward Rogers, who is a former NASA Chief Knowledge Officer, right? And he has done some amazing research on system studies, right? How to create large systems and how to do systems thinking, right?
These systems are?
I mean, he has studied them in the context of NASA and space shuttles and all of that. But he's then come up with his own theories and frameworks that he teaches at business schools in the US, right? So every year, at least twice, he comes to India to teach at Masters Union. And he teaches these mental models and these systems thinking models that students absolutely love, right? Now, I could not have gotten that kind of input from my full-time faculty, neither from a practitioner, right? So 30% of my faculty are people like this who visit mostly from the US, teach people very specific things that we think are very important in an entrepreneur's journey.
But how do you think that?
When we started building our curriculum, right, we met with a lot of recruiters, we met with a lot of practitioners, CEOs, MDs, partners, essentially our customers, right? These are the customers who are going to recruit our students in the future. And we asked them, what is it that you need, right? And we made a list of all the skills that they find useful. And then we worked backwards from those skills, came up with learning outcomes and found the faculty that best could teach those learning outcomes, right? So if, like, for example, I remember when we had met someone from BCG, right? And we share our campus with BCG. They had told us very clearly that they really believe in mental models and they really believe in certain frameworks that everyone should know, right? So I remember going on LinkedIn and searching for that mental model framework on LinkedIn and to see who are the trainers for that, right? And I found someone who eventually turned out to be Edward Rogers, who we then invited and he came and he taught, right? So first 30% is full-time faculty. Second 30% is this visiting faculty, mostly from the US, teaching very specific things. Then 40% of my faculty are practitioners. These are CEOs, MDs, CXOs, partners at various companies, mostly are recruiters who come and teach skills that they actually hire for, right? So for example, you spoke about Jivraj earlier, right? He's a angel investor, right? He runs Indian Silicon Valley, right? And there is nobody better than him to teach angel investing, right? So we actually call him. He spends a lot of his time on campus teaching students angel investing, right? Or introduction to venture capital or introduction to 0 to 1 journeys, right? For content, right? I will obviously love to request you to come in more regularly and work with my students. But if I cannot get your time, I'll ask someone from your team to come in, right? And teach students. Or I'll ask Tanmay, or I'll ask Ranveer, right? Guys, can you please come in? हर साल एक तो मुझे कोई मिल ही जाएगा जो आके वो वाला course cover कर देगा, right? For communications, you have a great communications course, right? I would love to ask you, boss, if you can please take out some time. And you might say, Pratham, I can't come Monday through Friday because I'm really busy. But Saturday, I can give you 4 hours. In fact, there are 5 Saturdays I can give you 4 hours each. So I'll be like, okay, done. My students will very much be available on Saturday. You please give me 4 hours for 5 Saturdays. That's 20-hour course. Deal done, right? So 40% of my faculty are practitioners like these. There's a very popular course taught by Mr. Rajat Mathur, who's the MD of Morgan Stanley. He teaches people decisions. How do you make decisions of hiring, firing, promotions, increments, bonuses? It's a very important course if you think about it. Nobody ever teaches it. It wasn't a course at Wharton, right? But the way he teaches it is through a simulation, right? He's drafted this very interesting simulation. People play with it. It's very hands-on, very experiential. Only he can teach that. No full-time faculty will be able to teach that. No visiting faculty from the US can teach that. But him, who's run the entire people organization at Morgan Stanley, is the best equipped to teach that course.
Correct.
Right?
Now, talk to me about the remuneration of each categories. Okay. Let's talk about the first segment, which is the full-time faculty. Okay. I think hourly rates would be the best.
No. So full-time faculty, they're on your roll. So you're paying them annually, essentially.
Okay.
Right? You have
their
annual
salaries
contracts
may
with
range
them.
from?
For a fresh faculty who's just finished his PhD from a top IIM, maybe 30 to 40 lakhs. Right? And this can go up to 1 crore, 2 crores, 3 crores for star faculty.
Got it. When it comes to visiting faculties?
You pay them for in 20-hour increments. Right?
20-hour increments.
Right,
What
so-
does that mean?
So basically, they are coming to India to teach your course, and each course is 20 hours usually, right? So you pay them for a 20-hour bracket. If they are teaching 2 cohorts, then that becomes 40 hours. They're teaching 3 cohorts, that becomes 60. The rule of thumb here is, on an hourly basis, you're paying them $1,000
$1,000.
per hour.
That's $20,000. Does that include travel and stay?
No, for travel and stay, we give them a $5,000, like a allowance, and they can use that allowance however they want. If they want to travel business, they can travel business. If they want to travel economy and save that money, they save that money.
Got it. And for practitioners, it's mostly free, right?
No. So, what we have realized is that if a practitioner comes and says, I'll do it for free, we say, no, we'll still pay you because we want to demand quality. If somebody is doing you a favor and doing it for free, then you can't demand quality. You can't say, sir, you're not teaching well. Right? So we still give them money. Now they may choose to donate that money, which most of them do. Right? A Rajat Mathur, when we give him whatever we give him, whatever little doesn't matter to him, he would usually give it for charity, is my guess. Right? But at least I can keep him accountable. Ki sir, wo marks ठीक time पे भर देना. Right?
So there is still a cost attached to it.
There is still a cost attached to it.
What would be this cost?
This cost, if someone is, let's say, a vice president who's teaching something very specific, some vice president at Facebook who's teaching how to do marketing on Facebook, maybe I'll pay 5,000 rupees an hour, $100 an hour. To someone of the level of Mr. Rajat Mathur, anything is less, but I think the highest we go is approximately $1,000 an hour. The average would be, I think, $500 to $550 an hour.
Got it. Perfect.
And we would also pay them in 20-hour increments.
20-hour increments. Okay. Pratham, here's one question that I always had. Okay. When it comes to a business school, the biggest problem, and this is not a problem from the kids, this is a problem that I have seen as a point of skepticism from the parents. That if they go to a business school, no matter it's a business, if they go to any college, no matter whether it's a business school or an engineering school, they often expect their kids to get placement.
Yeah.
Okay. As a result, no matter how desperately you want them to be entrepreneurs, you still somehow are accountable only in terms of the placement, right? As a result, like you mentioned, only after you show the placement report are the parents willing to pay money, which is fair from their side. But somehow I feel like it defeats the purpose of a business school, because I'll tell you why. When a student gets in, unless that student's parents are entrepreneurs, they will not understand the value of entrepreneurship. Okay. I'm talking about both students as well as parents, because students understand the fascination behind entrepreneurship, the opportunities and freedom of entrepreneurship, the money of entrepreneurship, but not the value of entrepreneurship. Similarly, when it comes to parents, their metric of success is always based on placement numbers. Because no matter how successful your business will be 10 years later, in year one, you cannot do a great job, right? So how do you tweak? I mean, I know for a fact that you can't change this marker of success, but as a person who's running a business school, do you feel compromised when people ask you for placement report instead of asking you how many businesses have started out of your batch?
There's always a plan A and a plan B. When any student comes to Masters Union, his plan A is always, I want to set up my own company, right? But they want the comfort of a plan B. Because it may be a risky endeavor to start a company. In case I fail, do I have this plan B where I can easily get a placement, right? And be employed, and I can pay off my loan in a predictable manner, right? So when students come, my first day, the address that I give to them is that, guys, let's build your startups, right? Are you all with me? They all say, yes, we are with you, fully committed. And for the 1 year, in the case of MBA, and 4 years in the case of undergrad, that they are with me, they are pursuing that startup full force, right? But as they start seeing the results of their startups, right, some of them realize that this is not for them. Some of them realize that entrepreneurship is for them, but maybe not this market. Someone realized that, yeah, I want to work in this market only, but maybe not this product, right? Now, it's very difficult for them to start again. And then they're like, okay, never mind. I tried my hand at startup. It did not work for whatever reason. Let me go back into the job market. I'll do this job for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. But eventually, I'll come back to being an entrepreneur, right? So while students may want a job safety net, in the first year, second year, I think that I have done a good job and Masters Union has done a good job that eventually all of those people who enter the job market also eventually want to start up, right? And if over 10 years, more than 50% of my students start up, I think I would have done a great job.
So your goal is cultivating business acumen and not getting your students to build companies right after college.
20% should. That is my
20%
internal
should.
goal. Yeah, that is my internal goal that 20% of my students should not even consider placements. Last year it was maybe 10%. This year it's 15%. And next cohort, I'm sure it will touch 20%.
What are you doing so deliberately to increase this percentage?
What I do is very interesting, okay? If your startup is going well, but it's not broken away yet, एक साल में कोई successful नहीं हो जाता. For the next 1 year, after they graduate, I give them free office space and I give them 40,000 rupees per month, no questions asked.
Oh, wow.
We call it the founder fellowship. If you don't sit in placements, I will give you 40,000 rupees out of my own pocket, which will take care of your loan repayment and will also take care of your rent. Okay. Now that gives them some safety net. Number one. Number two, I also give them the privilege of sitting in placements next year. एक साल स्टार्टअप करो, नहीं हुआ कोई बात नहीं, एक साल और कर लो मेरे रोल्स पे, कोई इशू नहीं है. एंड तब भी नहीं होता, तब सेकंड ईयर में प्लेसमेंट में बैठ जाना. सो यू गेट 2 chances at placements.
This is one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard, man. I'll tell you why. My best friend Atharva, his father is an entrepreneur, okay? And he's a pretty legendary entrepreneur. This is exactly what he told him. And I was like, Kullu, I just wish Ajay uncle was my father. Because this is exactly what he said. He said कि मैं तेरे को ऑफिस स्पेस दूंगा, मैं तेरे को पीसी ला के दूंगा, उसके साथ ना मैं तुझे एक स्टाइपेंड दूंगा जिससे तेरा रोज का खर्चा चल जाएगा. ठीक है? If you want, I'll also pay for your employees, 1 or 2 employees at max. It's not like you can just build an army of employees. But this will go on for the next 1 or 2 years until you understand whether you really want to do this or you want to change your path. And that gave him the audacity to say, you know what, let me just go ahead. Otherwise, we see 2 extremes. Either the father says, just handle my business, or the father says, you know what, I'm not going to give you anything, just start from scratch. But this safety net, which you are doing deliberately,
This hardness, yeah.
is just at the perfect, it balances risk as well as safety so perfectly that it gives the child a conducive atmosphere and a safety net so that they can take more risks.
I'll give you some success stories from this cohort. Whoever is in Gurgaon right now, go to Zomato and search for Lexi's sandwich.
Kaun sa sandwich?
Lexi's, Lexi.
Okay.
Lexi. These are 4 kids, 2 from Pondicherry, brother, sister, 1 from Amsterdam, and 1 kid from Delhi, ex-Zomato. 4 of them got together to build a cloud kitchen. They sell gourmet sandwiches in Gurgaon on Zomato and Swiggy. Right? Doing really well. Their chili burrata is amazing. People must try. Right? They got founded as part of the venture initiation program where we do these founder fellowships. All 4 of them have put their savings as well as this 40,000 rupees that we give them together. So 1-1.5 lakh तो उनको मिल गया हर महीने का, उनके खर्चे निकल जाते हैं. So उनको bootstrap भी कर पा रहे हैं. They don't have to fundraise from outside. They don't have to dilute, etc., etc. Right? And they can stay on campus, use all the resources of the campus. And in fact, a couple months ago, you were talking about, I think, Vikram, right, who runs Biryani by Kilo? Vishal. And he was on campus, and these kids were building the startup. And I literally realized, like introducing them would be super great. So I just called 4 of them. I said, guys, Vishal is here. Just talk to him, right? And he gave them some insight. And so just being in that ecosystem really helped them. So I have so many of these examples. Yeah? I mean, I can go on and on. There's another company called Play Super. 2 kids, again, met at Masters Union. Actually, they knew each other from before. And they are building this loyalty platform for gamers. So they realized that studios that produce games, they have very little retention. So they created this thing where you play game on one platform, you can earn points and actually redeem it on some other platform, like a loyalty platform for gamers. Again, like they've raised money. They're also beneficiaries of the Founders Fellowship. There's another guy called Aditya Rathi building a company called Blue Brew. They make jeans, but that old Lee Wrangler kind of those jeans, faded with designs, not like the simple ones that you and I wear, but like, and doing really well. Like Tiger Shroff and Shraddha Kapoor are wearing his clothes right now.
What are you saying?
Right now. Bluebrew.com. You can
Spelling
go check
batao.
out BLUEBREW. Blue Brew. I don't know if it's .com or .in. One of those. And you can see Tiger Shroff and Shraddha Kapoor and one more. I forget her name. She's the daughter of like a very important actress. They're wearing his clothes. Again, he's a recipient of Founders Fellowship.
That is beautiful, man. And you also help students raise capital, right?
So what we do is, we were speaking about Y Combinator earlier. On the last day of the cohort, on the last day, which happens in May, all of our students who are doing these businesses, they get to present their ideas to 100 VCs on campus. Right?
This is called the demo day, right?
This is called the demo day.
Yeah.
Right? And you can actually see the demo day videos from the last few years on YouTube. They're all there.
I've seen them.
You've seen those? And all of our students get to present to 100 VCs. Now we know that getting those 100 meetings with 100 VCs will take them 2 years. But if we can get those 100 VCs to the campus and expose them to the startups, those 100 VCs listening can at least lead to 10 to 20 VC meetings. Correct. And maybe 1 or 2 will convert.
And if not that, if the VC sees a great presentation, even if the business model is not something that's investable, tomorrow, like 6 months later, when you drop him a cold email, that becomes a warm email.
In fact, I'll give you an example of Divita Saraf. She's an Ashoka University undergrad student doing masters at Masters Union. She was running an alcohol company. They were making wine for the Indian taste palette. Okay. Very interesting, right? And they were making wine by brewing tea. Okay. And she presented, and for whatever reason, the startup failed. However, she was presenting, this VC was in the audience. The VC was so impressed that eventually he gave her an interview to join that VC fund as an investor. And now Divita actually works there. Right?
So essentially, if you see, you're solving for 3 of the most important things required for entrepreneurship, which is access, safety, and knowledge.
Access, safety, knowledge, absolutely.
Exposure is extraordinary for Tetter, but for Masters Union, it happens through these visiting faculties.
Visiting faculties.
And also the activity that where these kids have to find something from the unorganized market and sell it.
It's in term 1. It's a very interesting game that we play, right? So in the morning, students are given 10,000 rupees and they're told to go to the flea market. We call it the Banjara market in Gurgaon. And they have to procure unbranded stuff. Then they get 2 hours to brand that stuff and then go into the high street area like Cyber Hub and then actually sell their products with a brand now for profit. And whoever makes the most profit in those 12 hours wins, right? It's a great, that also gives them this sense of hustle. And all of this is done to basically instill confidence कि मैं कर सकता हूँ.
Correct.
That is the most important thing. Self-belief, if you can create in somebody, they can do anything. Indians, and especially Indian kids of that, that middle class, upper middle class, the biggest thing that they lack is self-belief and confidence.
Correct. By now, let's come to the last segment. And here's where we complete the flywheel. तो हमने customer acquisition सीख लिया और बाद में हमने सीख लिया कि प्रोफेसर्स को कैसे डिप्लॉय करते हैं, कितने कैटेगरीज ऑफ प्रोफेसर्स होते हैं. With Tetter, we also covered exposure and the importance of exposure. We spoke about
curriculums.
Yeah. And
learning
now,
by doing, yeah.
We come to the final part of the flywheel, which is placement. Regardless of how well you have done in the previous stages, unless you give out placement because of the way Indian society functions, you will not get the report card of a successful B school. Although that's quite oxymoronic.
Yeah, we have established that.
Okay. So I just want to understand, what is your approach to A, doing the market research to understand which are the most relevant skills? B, after you understand which are the most relevant skills, how do you then get rid of companies for placements to complete the flywheel?
Got it. Great question. See, I think you have to first start with the students. Let's say I have 200 students in my program. I ask them, what are your dreams? What do you want in life? What kind of companies do you want to work with? What kind of cultures do you want? Do you want to work in India? Do you want to work abroad? If you want to work abroad, in which countries do you want to work, right? So like this, right in the beginning, we make a list of our target companies, right? So we ask each student to give us 3 or 4 target companies. We write that list down. And then through a sales effort by our sales team, we actually then go out into the market selling our students to these companies. It's a B2B sales process. I literally have a 40-person placement team whose job is to sell my students into the market, right? So we have a list of companies we are targeting. We divide that list of companies amongst our 40 sales team. And then it's everyone's incentive, structure, system, process. It's all structured so that they can go and close that company, right? So we know that, let's say this is company A, let's say Google, right? Or let's say Talabat in Dubai. We know that these are the 6 students who really wanted this company. So we'll go to that company. We'll meet the hiring manager. We'll meet the CEO. We'll pitch to them. We'll tell them what Masters Union is. We'll tell them who our students are, and we'll tell them exactly what these 6 students can do for them.
Do you also ask them what exactly are the skill sets that they are looking for?
I think there's enough information online, right, on their website, etc., which we can easily fathom कि यार इनको ये चीजें चाहिए होंगी.
Example दो मुझे.
जैसे Talabat है. Talabat is a quick commerce company in Dubai, right? So we understand they need program managers. They need program managers with ops background. We know they need e-commerce managers. We know they need category managers, and we know exactly what skills those category managers need, right? Because that much research even our team is doing. We are teaching those kind of courses also. The students are building those kind of companies also in VIP, right? In the venture initiation program, they're doing drop shipping, so they have that experience. So we take all of the students' CV or their proof of work, their portfolio. Then we go to the company and say, hey, listen, there are these 5 openings on your website. We want to pitch these 5 students for this one opening. We want to pitch these 6 students for this opening, right? Give our students a chance,
Got it.
right? This is very different from how placements happen in other colleges.
Yeah, placements usually happen in the way that they look at the biggest TAM. So if they understand that there is a huge market for business development, they will make sure that the students are trained for business development in such a way that they're able to apply for placements. The companies come up and these are mass recruiters, right? They just take out students in bulk, and that's how the
We
students
also
didn't
get those.
fulfilled.
We also get those.
Okay.
But generally, the way placements happen in these old business schools is that there's a day zero. They tell whoever wants to come to campus can come on this day zero, and we'll give you a schedule, and you can come, recruit our students, and go. That's how placements happen. Now, what happens in that is that the student only gets one day to decide which company they want to go for. In our case, student gets enough time, they get enough interview chances, they meet a lot of different companies over a period of 1 year. Placements don't happen in one day, they happen over 6-7 months. So our process is slightly different. Essentially, it all boils down to considering each student a product, an individual product that we are going and selling to the highest bidder. Right? It's a very crude way of looking at it, but it's also the best way of doing it.
B2B sales, like
It's
you mentioned.
B2B sales, right?
Understood.
How Infosys, how TCS sell their contracts, B2B contracts. Similarly, we sell our students.
But this way, the placement packages are not under your control, right? Are they?
They're a little bit more in our control, right? So because then we will only target roles that are commensurate with our students' expectations and their abilities versus the other way around, where a company is coming to campus, they already have a fixed salary that they will offer to every student. Good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter to them.
Got it. Do you also design your syllabus on the basis of students' expectation and how the market is functioning?
Absolutely. Like every last 3 years, our syllabus has completely changed. Now, what we were teaching 2 years ago, this year we have to teach it very differently because of advent of AI. Right? Product management 2 years ago is very different from product management today. Finance 3 years ago is very different from fintech today. So we have to change our, and by the way, we don't have to change it ourselves. When we bring the faculty from the companies, they automatically teach what they are recruiting for, what they are looking for. So that automatically gets baked in.
Understood. This is the reason why you're able to get great placements.
This is the reason because we are taking it as a sales process, right? Now, last year the market was really bad, right? It took us 3 months extra to place all of our students. Still, we finished before the students were graduating. We still finished in November. The students were graduating in December, and we just had a convocation in January where you were there. But it took us 3 months more than it took us last year because the market was tough. So we had to do twice the number of sales. Right? If last year it took my student 3 interviews to get an offer, this time it took him 6 interviews to get an offer. So while the other business schools were struggling and a lot of the students were left unplaced, in our case, we just spent that much extra time. Right? And so that's usually how it works. And then, of course, you can pitch for internships. You can say, hey, if you like my students during internships, which is a low risk way of testing the waters with Masters Union. And then if you can convert them in the future, that's also okay. If you want to give my students a consulting assignment and see how they do in the consulting assignment, that's also okay. If you want to give them a case study to analyze, and if they come back to you with the case study and you like them, then you can hire them. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all. So we essentially craft the product and the offering for each company differently.
Understood. Bro, I think that completes the flywheel then. So what we've spent close to 4 hours talking about Masters Union, the business model, your grandfather. This has been amazing, man. Thank you so much. I'm taking back so much that, like you just saw, I had to request a few extra papers just so that I could take down everything that you're saying.
I really hope that you start a business school. You'll be so inspiring as a business school founder. Not just a business school, as a university founder. You have so much to give. You're so nurturing in the way you approach things. And the history that you've built, the brand that you've built with Think School, I really envy you, seriously, boss. And I really feel you'll be so successful, and India needs it.
Thank you so much, bhai.
India needs it more than anything else, coming from you.
That means the world to me, man.
Yeah, the genuineness that you will do it with. I think it's going to be above all. I look forward to seeing you in that avatar, and then I'm going to ask you questions. Hopefully.
But thank you so much, bhai. This really means a lot, and I am really thankful that I have somebody to look up to in terms of ambition. And I'm not even hoping. I know for a fact that you will be among the top 10. And when you're among the top 10, we will cut this out as a reel and put it out
Yeah,
to
done.
tell people
Sounds
that
good.
we saw this coming long time back.
If you every year come and teach the course on communications and content, then I have no doubt. Then we will
100%
do
I'll
it.
come to teach. And you know what is the most fulfilling thing about Masters Union? When I come over there, everybody's just so excited. That's not the case with a lot of colleges, right? They're just so excited all the time that I feel energized after delivering a lecture. So I just came there last time. I think I spent about an hour or so, and then we had a meetup, and then we spent about 20
Right,
minutes
right,
over
right.
there. That was incredible. And after the meetup, I just thought of just going back, and then there was some fight that was happening between the previous batch and the new batch, saying, "Why didn't I just come and teach over there?" I said, "No, I promise I'll come to teach."
Great problem to have.
So that excitement is something that's quite infectious, and it's just amazing, man. I look forward to come and teaching there.
No, thank you so much for saying that. Means the world to us.
Thank you, bro. Thank you so much.